But yes, hi everyone. Also, just so you know, this is being recorded, and we will be sharing this over, I believe, to Facebook. Hopefully for future use. That way, people who aren't here now can eventually see it. Welcome, Neve. Welcome, Natalia. Good to see you all. We have some healthy representation tonight from both our youth and young adults, and I know we'll only have more as the night continues. Um, Obviously, it's still early. We'll be starting hopefully at around 5:50. Lord willing. So thanks everyone for popping in just a tad early right before we get started.
For sure. Everybody's in the mood for some good dialogue, man. Some good conversation. How are you feeling about this whole thing, Nate? You think it's gonna be a good talk?
I think so. I think I don't know if you guys all had the pleasure. I'm gonna put Alyssa on the spot. But one of our speakers, I believe our first for the evening, right?
Yep.
Pastor, she actually preached this morning. And if any of you guys have ever like had to do any type of presentation, any type of public speaking, that just takes a lot of stress. That takes a lot of time. And she really poured her heart in this one. So if you guys do have some time after we're done with tonight, go back and listen to her sermon. I know she has many thoughts she's also going to share with us tonight, even on a different topic such as mental health, though certainly the two might be related in certain ways, but we'd
Yeah.
love for you guys to just think about where our speakers are coming from. And some of them we know very dearly, like Brianna and um, and Alyssa, and some of us have shared their lives with us, like Robert when he gave his testimony, when he spoke to us about identity a couple months back. So it's going to be really fun, I think, Felipe, knowing how all of these perspectives can overlap, right? And create a
Mm-hmm.
clearer picture, not only of mental health, but ultimately like the road to recovery as human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
What that looks
Mm-hmm.
for us long term. And we know that, a lot of what we do down here, right? It's creating a human way of responding, of even coping to, our sinful lives. And so I know that I've received education um, from these people already in many ways, lessons to take to my own life. And I'm excited
Mm-hmm.
to take some lessons for my mental health life and for my spiritual life. I think that's going to be really important. And
Mm-hmm.
also just a
Mm-hmm.
chance for them to share who they are and get to know everybody here. Sometimes that's the best medicine, just getting to know someone, being able to hear them and share with them. I think that's so important
Mm-hmm.
for this generation. So yeah,
No,
it's going to be
that is
great.
for sure. That's for sure, Nate. I think that the panel that we have tonight is a great broad spectrum of perspectives, ideas, backgrounds, and I'm super excited because of that. I know that Alyssa's name, Bree's name, even Rob's name was mentioned, but I'll mention Jackie's name.
Please
She's
do.
she's the newbie in the NSYC group, but nevertheless, I feel like you guys are gonna love her really, really quick. Trust me. She has a very spontaneous personality, and she has a lot of great things to share. I think you guys are gonna, bring her into the NSYC circle without a problem, real quick. But I like the panelists, man. I like the panelists that we have. I think we have good experience, good life stories, good perspectives, good things to be shared and heard. So I'm excited completely, my man, that we're gonna start in a few minutes, and more people are joining us very, very soon. I do know that. So I'm excited.
I was not expecting such a strong panel. I didn't
Mm.
think we'd get a chance to organize all of these people together. So just to have this opportunity is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reminder to me that you have to find the silver linings, and being able to do things online means that we can get Rob and Jackie over at North Shore
Mm-hmm.
when they might not
Mm-hmm.
typically be able to make it, and that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For all of you who are still joining us, I'd like to direct your attention to the number that is being shared by Ilyash, one of our hosts on the screen. Ilyash is our audiovisual leader, as well as miscellaneous leader in general for like everything when it comes to North Shore youth and young adults. And he has put up our anonymous number on the screen, which you can text to put in your questions for tonight. So that way you don't have to share who you are. If you don't wish it, you obviously may if you like to. And for every single anonymous number, we're going to be doing our best to put you, I think, in a raffle for basically maybe a prize that will be revealed at the end.
It will be revealed, my friend. All shall be revealed at the end.
Absolutely.
So do make sure you participate. Make sure that you send in some questions for our panelists. Trust me, it might pay off in the end.
Thank you. I do want to remind everybody, for the sake of coherence tonight, we are asking that mics be mostly turned off. We may have some chance for you guys to directly interact with the speakers during the Q&A portion, but we have a lot of panelists and we have a lot of time. And so we'd ask that you not interrupt any of the speakers over Zoom. We'd also ask that if you can, do your best to just when you're asking a question, speak it quickly or simply text it. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end to interact with the speakers. But for the most part, remember that if your mic's on, there is feedback that carries, and hopefully we can just keep the night moving along so that all our speakers have a chance to share every single little detail of their amazing perspective and give us some thoughts at the end for our discussion panel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, Nate, exactly. And before we continue, honestly, I just have to get a quick shout out, Nate. I have to do it. I have to give a shout out to the coolest mom on Facebook. All of you here have met our dear friend, Paul Turner. He spoke to us,
Yes.
I believe, 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago on the Zoom. And it was very impactful, very good conversation. His mother is actually with us on the live right now. Miss Melanie, how you doing? Man, is she there? I see her name here.
Well,
I wonder if she's muted. She is muted, but I think she can hear us by some reason.
If she's
But
not there, that's fine. I did say everybody be back, before 6, but
so she'll be back hopefully.
So she should be back.
She
But
should
yes,
be
for
back.
all of you,
I really want you to come sit down and watch this thing. Come. You will learn some stuff. I think so.
I agree. We're all going to learn a lot tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Sister Rona. And once again, thank you so much for joining us, Sister Melanie. I believe, where's Paul from? Is it Tennessee or Kentucky? It's Kentucky.
Kentucky.
Right? Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
got it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm seeing here that we are, there she is, there, she's replied to us.
Louisville,
Yes.
Kentucky, got it.
Louisville in the house. Welcome, Miss Melanie, once again. By the way, guys, coolest mom on Facebook. So go follow her.
She's pretty cool.
So anyway, Miss Melanie, we just want to thank you for your son, Paul, the great ministry that he's doing. Keep encouraging him, and we're encouraging him as well. All right, guys, so it's a little bit past 10:02. I think this is the perfect time, Nate, for us to kind of give an introduction to what exactly is this all about. This is called Level Up the Mind, and this is going to be the start, guys. This is only the beginning of a huge series that we're trying to start here at North Shore online for our youth. It's for our growth. It's for our development. It's for our benefit. It's all by youth, for youth. And it's going to be a whole bunch of series on different topics. So this first one happens to be based on mental health. So it's called Level Up the Mind. And the future ones will have Level Up finances, Level Up relationships, Level Up something else. And the list is going to go on and on and on. So do keep in mind that in the future, we'll have plenty more of these. But we're super excited to talk about mental health. Right now, we know the importance of it. As we mentioned before, there's a lot of young people here in this chat tonight. And man, I take my hat off to you guys, man. I don't know how you guys are doing it, being, young people, teenagers at a time like this, when it's super tricky. You want to be out there, you want to hang out with your friends, you want to have fun, you want to be, running free without having to worry about any of this stuff. And then boom, coronavirus and all these crazy things are happening. And that can do a number, that can do a damage in our mental health. I believe it. I know that I've been through some things myself. And honestly, we came together and we put this program together for you guys. It's for your benefit. It's all for you. It's out of love. It's a gesture. It's a project of love for all you guys. And we really appreciate all you guys coming to hang out with each and every one of us. So before we begin, we have to pray. God's got to be at the wheel of this thing. So I want to invite everybody right now, if you, wherever you might be, just close your eyes and let's just talk to God real quick before we start, shall we? Dear Heavenly Father God, thank you so much for your love and your grace. Thank you for your guidance. Please be with us right now as we're about to embark on this amazing mental health journey that's a much needed one. We believe, Lord, that you really want to impact our minds, to open our minds, to heal our minds, so that your amazing truth can reign in our minds and in our hearts, Father, and transform us. And Lord, we don't know the details of everybody's lives in here, only you know that. But Father God, we just pray that everybody and every family represented here, they completely surrender their hearts and their minds to you, even in these crazy times that we're living in, Lord. We might not know what's going to happen next month. We might not know what's going to happen at the end of the year, but Father God, we know who holds the future, and that's you. So please be with us, be with our conversations, be with our panelists, please be with our discussions that we're going to have, and help us to just have a good time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I can't forget to also introduce our panelists for this evening. We're going to have 4 of them, and also our facilitator, whom all of you already know, our very own Nate Velez, who's already on the other line, ready to get us going. But I just have to do a brief introduction of our panelists. We have our very own Elder Alyssa Hislop, the same famous Elder Hislop that preached today, this morning, the amazing sermon. She's going to be here tonight with us talking about mental health in the middle of a scary pandemic. How do we deal with it? How do we go about it? So that's going to be her conversation. She's going to be the very first one talking to us tonight. Right after her, we're going to also have one of our youth leaders, Brianna Sambury Pevler. That's right, the same Brianna Pevler that's always been with us in every activity that we do, much beloved, much cared for. She's going to be talking to us about mental health in the middle of all of the social crisis that we're experiencing right now, especially dealing with social injustice to people of color, minorities, especially our Black brothers and sisters here in America. We thought that she would be a great candidate for this conversation. She agreed, and she is here with us tonight. So she's gonna go second. After her, we're gonna have our very good friend, Pastor Rob Machado. Do you remember him? All the way back from April, we had Rob come in and do our youth week of prayer, and it was powerful. It was impactful. I know that it moved me. I know that it moved a lot of you guys. And he's coming all the way live from the East Coast, from Maryland. He's going to be talking to us tonight about the idea of faith and mental health. It's going to be a super critical discussion, because everywhere I go, I've always heard this weird conundrum that faith and mental health are at odds with each other. Is it? Well, we're going to have a conversation about that afterwards. And at the very, very end, I want to introduce to you guys a very new friend to our circle here at the NSYC, Jacqueline Donna, all the way from Andrews Theological Seminary, a good friend, worked together with her at Campus Ministries, very passionate about mental health, very passionate about mindfulness, and the practical ways that young people like you and me can engage every day with improving our mental health. So I'm excited. I know Nate's excited. I hope that you're excited too. So Nate, take us away, man, and introduce us to Alyssa. And Alyssa, it's all you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving us a wonderful introduction. To just add some detail, a lot of what we've been doing with the youth and young adults lately has been focused on the concept of identity. If you guys were here for Pastor Rob's week of prayer with us, he was able to lead us out talking about what it means for us to have an identity in Christ. And now we believe that it's time for us as North Shore to get a little bit more specific with certain aspects of our identity. And so we believe that during some of the recent crises that have come up, it'd be important to address the subject of mental health together, especially since it's something that oftentimes churches don't talk about. And someone who is no stranger to talking when it comes to church is our dear friend, Elder Alyssa Hislop, who, as I've already mentioned, spoke earlier this evening. And today she'll be talking to us about mental health in a pandemic. Thank you so much, Sister Alyssa. Please take it away.
Wow. Thanks, you guys, for having me. It is always an honor to talk to people who have a ton more energy than I do. And to talk about something like mental health, like which you've said is so important for our existence as human beings. As they said, my name is Alyssa. I've been coming to North Shore for it's I think 25 years this year. And at first, I guess I should lay out a disclaimer in terms of in terms of mental health, right? In terms of privilege, I would say that mentally speaking, or in terms of mental health, I've been dealt a better hand than quite a few. Which is to say that the stuff I share today is things that obviously I've lived through and that have helped me. But just because that fills my glass doesn't mean it'll do the entire job for somebody else. So I guess that's kind of how I wanted to start in terms of that. You guys asked me to talk about mental health in the pandemic, and it's interesting because I had a bit of a struggle once things went sideways with the pandemic. In March, I was looking forward to a really good year. I had planned to travel. I had bought new shoes for said travel. I had planned what my hair was gonna look like every time I traveled. I was feeling good about the year. In 2019, I had a lot of mobility issues. I cracked something. I tore something in like my hip. So I literally kind of walked with a limp. And so I was really enjoying the fact that in 2020, I could walk the way I wanted to, I could function the way I wanted to. And then one day we woke up and we were in the middle of a disaster. So for those of you who don't know, I'm currently attending school at Andrews. I'm studying at the seminary. And Andrews basically shut down at spring break, gone. And I was fine with that because we were all trying to stay healthy. We all understood what happened. But almost immediately, things changed overnight. We went to sleep one night and we were looking forward to months more of school, and then all of a sudden we weren't. And so all of a sudden I was waking up every day and I had nowhere to go. So I sat in my house. I live alone. And as an introvert, like the first week and a half, 2 weeks was like fantastic. It was quiet. I didn't really miss people too much. I saw my family on weekends. And I thought I was okay. But then I started to notice that my thoughts were going a little sideways. There were questions of self-worth, I guess, of value, of what my purpose is here on earth. It got a little uncomfortable. It didn't help that I was reading way too much information. I was on social media a lot. I kept reading up on like all the new symptoms. I read about people's accounts. It was not a good mix. Me being alone for 5 or 6 days out of the week, completely alone, like seeing not another human, and consuming all that social media, consuming all of that news. It started to hurt in ways that I didn't think it would. So I distinctly remember the day that I realized something was wrong. It's because I started to feel very separate from the world, where I felt like there was a wall in between me and reality, where I was kind of watching everything happen, but not really participating. I knew I hurt, but I couldn't emote, I couldn't talk about it. And I ended up in that fog for another week and a half or so. Then by God's grace, my parents ended up at the house where I'm at for about a week. And I realized I was feeling a little bit better around them. And I told them, I said, I think something's wrong. I'm not feeling too good. And finally, it sort of broke into my consciousness that perhaps being alone all that time and reading all that bad news had triggered long-standing problems that I had not addressed, that I had not really been careful to keep monitoring, if you will. So as it happens, I reached out to some friends and I said, I think I'm not doing too well. I need you to pray for me. And that was two really good friends of mine, two people that will always pray for me whenever I need it. And legit, within an hour of that, I was in my room crying, which at the time, it kind of felt like, not a failure. It just felt like things were getting worse, the fact that I was crying. But really what that ended up being for me was the moment that I realized I needed to do something different. I reached out to more people to pray for me. And, you know, it's funny, we're talking about like later on, whether faith and mental health concerns and reaching out for professional help are, if they can work together, and I'm a living testimony that it can. In that moment, I also knew I had to reach out to the counselor that I had not been seeing, because once Andrews shut down, it was hard. You couldn't see people face to face. So eventually they set up telehealth. And so I made a list of things that I needed to do to try and maybe not fix it, but figure out how to deal with what was going on. So I made an appointment with a counselor. I kept talking to people about praying. I reached out to people to let them know what was going on with me, because my people at home thought I was hanging out with friends at school, and my people at school thought I was hanging out at home. So I had been fairly isolated, and nobody knew that I was really struggling. So yeah, that moment, like I said, was sort of a catalyst for me actually deciding in that moment that I needed to do things differently and find ways to deal with what was going on. So prayers helped, my counselor helped. I brought myself back to Illinois, because this is where my parents are, and they were able to give me some of that social stimulation that I needed. And I learned, I think, a lot about myself. I learned things that I need to survive, and that's something that you all will be experiencing as you grow up, as you get older, as you walk into more authentic versions of yourselves. You will learn the things that you need to survive. And if you're doing it right, you'll make adjustments. You will accept the part of you that you didn't think was so great, the parts that make you uncomfortable, the parts that make you feel vulnerable. All of those things go into the beauty that is you, and denying that part of you, quite frankly, takes more energy than we really have to spare. So in terms of what your brain does, it does obviously a lot of things. It's a very busy creature. And I learned that here's how I understood it. Like, you know that your body has different systems to understand the outside world, right? When you touch something and it's hot, your brain immediately tells you it's hot, don't touch that. There's another system, which the name I can't remember right now. I think it's the endocrine, where your body compensates for a while. You can, for me, it was like my social life. I'm very neglectful about my social life. And so my body was, my whole person was compensating for that part of me that I was not nurturing. And one day it gave out. And the whole rest of my body was like in scrambles. It's sort of like a car, you know, this is not the best example, but if you're driving a car, you know, there are 4 wheels, and one wheel you can probably drive on a flat for a little while with one flat tire, right? There's 3 will generally kind of keep you moving for a little bit. But if you slash 2, all of a sudden you're just driving in circles. You slash 3 and all of a sudden your car is just like, no, we're done. And our bodies are the same way. It will, we have a margin of error, but there are limits to it. And so I guess the other big thing that I wanted to communicate is that mental health is so interlinked with our physical health, our spiritual health, our social health, our emotional health, and we cannot afford to ignore one. We cannot afford to emphasize one and not the others. Eating well will help with your mental health. Exercising will help with your mental health. Reaching out to people in this, even though I used to hate phone calls, I need to see people face to face, but that's an adjustment I've had to make to keep my family safe. I live with people who are at risk for COVID. And so I've had to find different ways to deal with that. I now have regularly 3-hour-long conversations, and that's not something that I used to do before. So I wanted to share that when we are talking about our health with mental health, we are talking about a holistic being. We are talking about taking care of all of these things because they do interact with the others. I think that is the overwhelming majority of the story I had to share.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I know all of us here at North Shore appreciate your openness. You have had to do a lot today. So thank you for just, your brain's got to be all over the place, but for coming back, being able to talk to us about what it means for us to try and put that brain back in one piece. Sometimes that requires doing things we're not used to doing. I believe that now we want to have a very brief discussion. How long do we have, Felipe, to stay on track?
We have 20 minutes.
We have 20 minutes. Great. Okay. So the brief discussion that we have was supposed to be related to what Alyssa just presented. Alyssa just asked, or Alyssa just told us about how during the pandemic, oftentimes it's easy to forget that sometimes we have friends who maybe forget that, oh, maybe I'm not with family, or family forgets, oh, maybe I'm not with friends. And so I wanted to ask, how much does the mental health issues that arise out of a pandemic like this, how much might that stem from feeling abandoned or feeling lonely? I know that's something that's true for me. I didn't know if anyone wanted to share it, or if I didn't know if anyone wanted to share, perhaps instead of from their own personal life, on observation they've made, or perhaps something if they know something on the subject. I know Joanne has been very active in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing. But if anyone has a point that they would want to make about the ties between mental health and being distanced from other people, in this case, we have to physically be distanced from others. Now is your time to speak. Please go off ahead. Does anybody have any thoughts they would like to share on that before we continue? I do have a couple questions, but I'd love to see if anyone has something to share.
So I don't know if anybody, but I want to give everybody to kind of talk. That's why before I kind of share, the medical aspect of things. But I guess I can share this. And Alicia, sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly. You kind of shared, that there was those moments, when you felt like nobody knew where, if you were with somebody else or you were with your family. So those moments of loneliness. And that brings something that is actually critical in this pandemic that we're seeing, right? So at least I'm gonna speak for the Illinois, right, jurisdiction, but what we're seeing and what we're weighing as public health people is that mental health is on the rise. It's actually more more prevalent than the actual death of the actual virus. So we kind of have to weigh, and mental health is non-communicable disease, right? So we kind of have to weigh, you know, between the lines between communicable diseases and non-communicable. And what we found out, it's more, it's a challenge to deal with the mental aspects, because then even if you accept it, we don't have the tools in place to just heal it right away, because we have not studied it yet to that capacity. And therefore, like conversations like this, where now we're kind of talking at a community level, you know, Alicia sharing to others. And therefore, this is called an intervention and awareness and sort of healing, to share that you're not alone in this situation, that there is millions of people being affected with mental health that might be on a verge of, you know, getting into helpless situations and no return. And when you mentioned, you know, the interpersonal, like not reaching out to you, the interpersonal relationship elicits, it's not truly endocrine, but it's hormones that are taking place. So dopamine is one of the hormones that is very critical when we are exchanging, when you have that 3-hour phone call. Not only does it validate your memory, we have this center that we're looking at, but it also very critical social determinant of health called purpose. So one of the things when it comes to purpose, you have to have a person that values you. And dopamine is also now studied even in PTSD, you know, when you share those stress memories. But we know dopamine is a precursor to other stress hormones such as epinephrine and norepinephrine, that kind of release when you're stressed, like there's a fear flight hormone. So if these hormones are very critical to not be going down the drain, like a cascade of things, we need to have these interpersonal relationships that are critical to help alleviate, mental health, one of the critical things that we are looking at. So thank you for sharing that, Alicia, and thank you for being brave and helping others by sharing your story to help others who are going through the same situation.
Thank you so much for your comments. Joanne, I don't know if anyone had to add on to that in case any of you guys are joining and need a TLDR for what she was saying. Basically, Alyssa was sharing about the importance of finding interpersonal relationships to her during the pandemic. And that's something I think all of us can relate to. I really want to appreciate Sister Rona's openness in the chat to share the strength that is required to really get through these times. Joanne was sharing, how our body responds to interpersonal relationships, how hormones function differently when we interact with people, as to when we don't interact with people, the release of hormones in our body. I know I'm not very well versed on the scientific nature of mental health, and that's something that, at the very least, I hope to be able to understand more as I get older. To also know how my body functions. That's probably a really good takeaway, I think, from what Alyssa shared, is to know that when we're confronted with something like this, we need to be aware about how we're reacting to a situation, about how our body is reacting to a situation, and to be ready to make those adjustments, to be ready to know what to do for our own sake, what the healthy choice is. So thank you so much for sharing that, Alyssa. I did have a question related to Alyssa's comments. I don't believe we have a question in the chat just yet, but if you guys have any questions that you would like to ask, if you have any discussion points you'd like to make, feel free to do that over in the anonymous number. I'm going to ask Ilyash to post that once again. It's in the chat. It should also be on our screen whenever Ilyash gets around to that. Our anonymous number is 872-703-4767. So some of you have already shared the way in which the mental health pandemic in which the COVID-19 pandemic has perhaps caused a mental health pandemic, has perhaps caused issues with mental health. How many of you, do you have any thoughts? Maybe Alyssa, you can jump in if you'd like, but I'd love to know how many of you question whether or not we'll ever get back to a new normal. And I think that's always the question that's been on my mind. Will we ever get a chance to really get back to normalcy? And if we don't, what does that mean for mental health? I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. Alyssa, please feel free to take charge of that question as well. But if anybody has any thoughts, please, you're welcome to share right now. How does the new normalcy affect our mental health? Or for others, perhaps, what is the new normal? Is there a new norm for mental health that needs to be addressed?
I can't pretend that I have an answer to that question, because I don't even think we've adjusted to this, whatever this is. We're still, I mean, we were kind of doing better, and then we decided not to anymore. And so in some ways, we're kind of revisiting some sort of version of trauma, I feel like, from when this first started, because we have gone backwards. I will say that I did want to add, because I just looked back at my notes again, that I think it's important that we remember to be patient with ourselves. Because, so like for myself, like I if I'm being frank, like my life has been fairly uneventful, right? Like I have both my parents, like just you know, the thing that is, there's like privilege all over the place in terms of stuff that'll make your life really suck. And so I was hard on myself because I was having such a hard time with this, because I would sit down and I'm like, you know, nobody in my family died. I have a roof over my head. My life should be fine. Why am I freaking out so much about this? Why is this hurting me so much when I'm not directly affected? And I remember once when I was younger. So for those of you who don't know, I have a younger brother. He's actually listening in on this. And and my mother taught me a very valuable lesson when I was younger, which was the power of pronouns. I found my brother very annoying. I still do sometimes, but we've married him off, so less of my problem. And I would do something like I'd hit him, or I'd call him something mean. And my mother would turn around and say, stop talking about my son like that. Stop doing that to my son. In that moment, he was not my brother. He was her son. And how I treated him affected her. So she reminded me in that moment of that. And when I start to yell at myself for not being stronger, for not being, you know, like stoic and being hurt and for what have you, I remember that I am not just mine. I am God's daughter. I belong to a person who loves me into what regular people might call madness. So when you hear those voices in your head that start to tell you about who you are not, or really starts to conflict with what you think you should know about yourself, I think it helps to remember that you perhaps can start treating yourself like you would want your own best friend to be treated, right? You'd be patient with them. You would remind them that you are loved, you are valued, and that I appreciate you. I actually, so the the moment that I was like breaking down in my room, I literally had to say out loud things that were contradicting the narrative that was sort of building in my head. Because somebody said, the mind believes what the ear hears the mouth say. And so we should also be careful of that kind of thing. But keep in mind that you are a loved person by a God who doesn't ever stop loving you. And yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm going on and on about that. Sorry. That doesn't answer your question at all, but there it is.
No, thank you for sharing. I think that's something to keep as a constant, to remind ourselves of who we are. We had just talked about identity as North Shore, well, maybe not just, but just a couple months ago. And I think with this series that Felipe is attempting to kick off with all of us here, that I'm just so happy to be on board with, you know, in order to level up our minds, it requires a constant reminder about what our identity is. And sometimes I think that it's very easy to forget that who we are is not limited to, you know, whatever 4x6 box we live in during a pandemic to try and keep ourselves from getting the plague. It's about what God has created us for, and it's not just for this world, it's for the next. So I do really appreciate that answer. I don't know. I had someone ask me the question over anonymously. They asked me, do you think that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense that there is a hope for the old normal? I don't know if that's quite as relevant for mental health, but I do think that certainly a sense of normalcy is something sometimes we all look for. I didn't know if anyone wanted to comment on whether or not they believed we'd ever be able to get back to a new normal.
Nathan, Robert here. Can you guys hear me?
Rob, go ahead.
So, as someone who has been assisting in the field of sanitation, so I'm on the front lines in that regard, and someone who has been working with daycares and daycare centers, my mom has one, I can say, honestly, a light seems a little bit far, but instead of thinking about how do we get back to the way things were, I think we got to start creating our own reality. We got to start thinking, how are we going to move forward, and how are we going to embrace and adapt to the new world that is already being created before our eyes? Because for myself, I'm already seeing businesses, jobs call us up to go and sanitize these places. The moment there's more 5 than 10 people in the building at once, even if it's like a fundraiser or something like that, people going forward are going to take diseases seriously, and they're going to want their things sanitized, because they're going to look back at this and say, we don't want that to happen again. Daycare centers now are not just going to house little kids. I'm actually going to have older kids and teach them. I'm going to have to start tutoring them, because their schools aren't opening back up and we're going virtual now. And so now I have to open myself up to the reality of the ministry with the little ones is now expanding to older ones, and helping parents with the burdens that they're going to have of going to work while leaving a child at home, probably going to this daycare now. And so it's like, I don't know if we're going to be able to go back to the old, but I'm trying to stay optimistic of how am I going to adapt, survive, and what can I create going into the new normal that is, because there's going to be so many more opportunities now to do things that we don't even realize. And we have to keep our eyes focused on what those opportunities are, instead of thinking if we can go back to our old comfortable world. I'm convinced that 2020, God wanted to shake everything up and let everybody know, hey, this world is not your home. All your dreams, your desires, your priorities, anything that had nothing to do with me, I'll shake it up right now and get you in line thinking about what you need to be thinking about in terms of eternity. And it might even be the growth, it might be the level up that a lot of us were needing, but didn't realize it was going to come in the form of a pandemic. And so that's just kind of what I am convinced of right now. I'm trying to look and see, Lord, what are you going to teach us in the storm, and what's waiting for us on the other side of this lake?
Thanks so much, Rob. I think that's a perfect comment to finish up this small discussion portion. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for presenting. I know you're going to be back and be able to field more questions for us. later, possibly at 8. But for now, we have to move on. We're going to move on to our next presenter for the evening. Felipe, why don't you go ahead and introduce her?
Definitely, my man. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody that participated in that discussion. Very well thought out. If you have any other questions for Alyssa or in regards to the topic that Alyssa addressed, still send them, all right? We're gonna address them at the end at our panel at 8 p.m. So don't go anywhere, okay? But as Nate said, I gotta introduce the next one. Man, she's a real one. She's been with North Shore from long ago. And man, everybody at the NSYC loves her. Our very own Brianna Sambry Pevler, basically like North Shore is like her family. She was brought up here. She loves the people. She loves to interact with youth, and she has a special burden for the mental health of young people, especially pertaining to minority young people in the world today. You see, we look all around and we see all sorts of social injustice taking place around us. You know, how do we act in regards to that, and how do we even respond? So honestly, I thought that Brianna would be the excellent candidate to give us this conversation right now on mental health and the social crisis. So go ahead, Brianna, take us away.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much, Brianna.
No problem. So I'm going to talk about mainly also the racial injustice that we face in this country, which is probably like the biggest pandemic that has plagued us so far. I can tell you personally, being Black in this country is probably the toughest thing that I've ever had to do. It's like I'm born into a country with an automatic target on my back. I've been born into a country where people assume who I am before they get to know me just by my skin. Being born into a society that just shows so much hatred towards you because of your skin. And it's mind-boggling. After watching the George Floyd video, like it unlocked like a whole treasure trove of trauma that I pushed to the side regarding to race. My whole life, I have debunked stereotypes and been teased, been bullied, not just for my skin, but even being mixed. Being a mixed Black person in this country honestly kind of sucks. Because I remember being at North Shore, I used to get teased for being multi-ethnic. And it's like they didn't believe that I was Puerto Rican because of my skin. They apparently have never met a Black Puerto Rican. You know, telling them that I'm Asian, they don't believe it because I'm Black. You know, they just see my skin, they see my hair, and that's all they assume. And that's all they pushed me to just identify as Black. And being a teenager, it's hard because I struggle so much with identity that being Black was like the majority of my identity. And it's like, poof, it's gone. Having to deal with your own friends saying, you know, oh, you know, I've never met a Black person that talked like you before. And having to figure out what does that mean? I don't talk ghetto. I don't speak how they speak. So right now, I'm just up here when it comes to being Black. Like I'm more than being Black. And then having to push aside my actual ethnic roots. Because first I was scared to speak Patois or Spanish in public just for people looking at me funny. Like, oh, she's not from here, or why is she speaking Spanish? She's Black, that's weird, you know, just to please people because it made them uncomfortable. And I lost myself and trying to refigure myself with that while being in this country is hard because everyone has these set stereotypes for Black people, and it put a major toll on my mental health, physical health, everything. So much anxiety and depression kicked in because it was awful. And for those who may not know, I suffered with depression since I was 15. Depression, suicide, suicidal thoughts, and all that stuff, that has plagued me really bad. And with all of this racial injustice going on, it honestly sparked those feelings back again for me. Because it's like, just because of my skin, I'm not enough. No matter what I do, I'm not enough. But let me tell you, being Black, being a person of color in general, being a minority, you are enough. Even if they see you as the lesser, you are not. You are the best that you can be, the best version of you can be right now. And if you don't see that, you can ask people. They can tell you, they can uplift you. God can uplift you. He's gonna put you in situations where you will thrive through that. And I feel with this pandemic, that brought me out more, because I've had to deal with my other side of the family. For those who don't know, I'm actually part white. My dad's half white, and that side of the family has, they've never really liked my mom's side of the family because we're Black. You know, all they were concerned was, okay, it's my grandchildren, that's it. And having to confront my cousin, he's even like, well, because you're part white. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't make a difference, because I will never live the life of a white person. Never. You look at my skin, you can't tell either or. It's not like I'm going to go around saying, oh, I'm part white. That doesn't make a difference. I'm Black. They see me as Black, and that's it. And then having to deal with just seeing people looking at me funny because of my skin. I remember being on the train. I was going to an anime convention, and then I had these purple box braids in. I had all these girls looking at me funny and staring at my hair. I remember being in a McDonald's bathroom. A white woman literally grabbed my hair and said, I like your hair, and proceeded to go into the bathroom stall. Spooked the absolute hell out of me. I remember even being in an airport. I was 17 going to Trinidad. At O'Hare, they told my mom they wanted to pull me aside to check my hair for drugs. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, I wasn't even an adult, and yet you want to check me for drugs just because of my hair. And now you see my hair was bigger, a lot bigger than this. And they thought I had drugs in there. That has haunted me forever. Now walking around, it's like, okay, they're gonna think that I have something going on. What are they thinking? Even stopping at stoplights and seeing police officers scares me, because every time I see an officer and they stop and they look at me, my first thought is, okay, they're gonna kill me. First thought. It's scary, and it's haunting, because every day when I leave the house, I pray to God to get me to where I need to go and get me back home safely. That was never a thought in my mind until all of these Black people have just been suddenly murdered. From George Floyd to Breonna Taylor. It's scary. And Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her sleep. That scares me to death, because I live in a building where there's a whole bunch of people doing who knows what. They can bang on your door at an instant. They can do whatever, drugs, whatever it is. And one of those people can bust in my house and kill me too. I'm scared. What if something happens and I call the police? And just by me sounding non-Black on the phone, when they come, they're gonna arrest me first, not realizing that I'm the person that called. It's so damaging. Like, my anxiety has risen so much. I can't sleep. I clench my jaw all night long, and it's taking a toll on me physically. All I want to do is be in bed. I'm tired. I'm just so stressed because I'm Black. It's hard, but I can tell you guys that it's okay. It's going to be okay. We are making a difference. We're slowly but surely making a difference. I know we're in another civil rights movement, but if our ancestors can make it through, we can make it through too. Now, going to mental health, the mental health community in the Black community is ironically taboo. We have gone through so much, yet we're so uncomfortable to talk about it. I remember being 15, and I used to cut myself because I was so depressed. And then being told, and then just coming on and saying, look, I need help, being told that's for white people. That's white people stuff. It hurt so much. And I'm like, okay. So that just threw all my feelings out the window. From then on, I was quiet. because every time I brought up being sad, depressed, I was overreacting. It was my fault. You know, just get over it. And in the Black community, their response is, oh, our ancestors got over it, so you can get over it too. And that is not the case, because we are still going through what our ancestors were put through, just in a more modernized way. And it sucks. It sucks so much. But now the Black community has woken up, because like now those people who used to taunt other Black people for having mental health issues are suffering through it themselves, and they realize how much it takes a toll on their mind and their body. They now get it. So now they're opening up and saying, okay, we need to get our children help. We need to get our adults help. We need to get everybody help. They are now recognizing that we have natural PTSD from our ancestors. You know, they recognize, you know, young kids growing up in the hood have PTSD from what they're experiencing, and they're wanting to get them help. You know, the Black men in our community are seen as strong, and that asking for help is more of a weak move, and it questions the masculinity. And so they just say, okay, if I just deal with it, I'll be fine. We are now helping them seek help, because it's so much. It's so much. So I just want to let you guys know that it's possible to get help. It's possible to be okay. You know, even though we are in tough times, really tough times, get help. I cannot stress that enough, you guys. Please get help, because I can tell you, I've suffered with it for 10 years without getting help. And I can tell you, I spiraled so bad that last year, if I had done what I originally planned to do, I want to be talking with you guys right now. I want to be present with you guys right now, because that's how far my depression went. And I got help. I reached out. I just put out on social media, like, look, I'm dealing with this. I need help. And then a flood of people came in to help that I didn't realize that could help. I cannot say, please get help. If you're a person of color in this country, get help with your mental health, even if you don't feel it, because you will eventually feel it. If it's not from you, it's from your friends. Because you know your friends are going through it and you love them, so you're also going through it. Get help with them. You know, if you need somebody, please call somebody, talk to somebody, even if it's a friend, a parent, a pastor, teacher, anybody. I'll let you know that, you guys, it's going to be okay. I promise you.
Thank you so much, Brianna, for sharing your powerful story. I know that there are a few here who perhaps know you well enough to know some of what you shared, but also for all those who are new, just recognize Brianna's bravery in sharing some from her own personal experience. Obviously, I think the big overarching thing that everyone knows about is the issue of race relations in America. But some of the levels to that discussion come with the issue, the overlap, the intersections of the discussion between race relations and mental health issues, as well as you even mentioned race relations and gender issues, right? Such as the issue of masculinity when it comes to the mental health issues. It just shows these discussions are so complex, and it's very difficult to have them. And I think sometimes that's why we shy away from it. And so, Brianna, I just want to thank you for being willing to come out and just talk about these things with us. I'd like to share with everybody, actually, some of the reason that North Shore decided that we were going to focus on talking about mental health for a season of time was because Brianna, as a youth leader, you know, shared with us how important it would have been for her as a young person to have those discussions when she was a youth, and how she knows there are many youth who want to have those discussions. And so I want to thank you, Brianna, for being a torchbearer in that way for North Shore, also being, you know, a second mother to so many of the kids at North Shore. Once again, Melissa already talked about interpersonal relationships. You've been the help. You've been the healer for so many people. And knowing that even those of us who perhaps sometimes try to be strong for others can go and get help, it's an example to me. I know it's an example to the other speakers that you're sharing your story with today. And hopefully it's an example for all those who stand here. I think I'm gonna I'm going to once again point to everybody. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please do so now. The question that I'd like to kind of start off with to everybody is really one that applies to North Shore particularly because it is a very multi-ethnic church, right? And Brianna started off her discussion with sharing about how her multi-ethnic, specifically also her Black experience, has been a source of stress and pain for her. And I wanted to ask, for those of you who are part of North Shore, do you guys see North Shore as a place that picks and chooses prejudice, picks and chooses different groups to dote on or to put down, to oppress? And if so, where? Because I think the first step to making progress is recognizing where our faults are. And so Brianna has shared how she was picked on when she was younger. I know that when I was at North Shore, while I always felt out of place, I know I never experienced the same amount of pain because I'm not seen as Black. And that's a very, I know for me, it's a very poignant issue where you suddenly realize, as much as you understand, oh, well, I'm Asian, I'm Latino, I'm different, it's not the same in this country. And so I want to know, perhaps, is that something that some of you who have been at North Shore have noticed? Do you see North Shore as a place that is making progress when it comes to treating our Black brothers and sisters better? Or do you see that we're perhaps slipping as time moves on?
I have kind of something to say in regards to that. I went to North Shore pretty much all of my middle school life and half my high school life before I moved on to a different university. But I would say that me being at North Shore, Brianna and I, honestly, I don't remember how we became friends, but we've been good friends since I think it was 3rd or 4th grade, or since I've gotten there, maybe 5th grade. And so it's very important to, wherever you go, you have to find someone who's going to have your back, who's going to talk, who's going to be there for you. And sometimes you have to observe everyone. Me, I'm an observer. So I observed where I was at a very young age. And so me coming from the South Side of Chicago, being Black, but not just being Black, and coming into an area that I've never been in, nobody knows me there. And you have to adjust, because when you're on the South Side, you have to adjust and you have to present yourself one way. When you're on the North Side or wherever else you are, you have to present yourself another way. And so while I was at North Shore, I ended up just being myself. It's okay being you, but it's something that you have to start out when you're young. You have to be okay with who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what scenario you're put into, because in the future, you don't know how those scenarios affected you when you were younger and how they're going to affect you today. I definitely know that it's hard. It's hard being a Black person, to be honest. You know, they think that Black people don't feel pain the way other people feel pain. Like, everybody feels pain. It might be to a different level, but we all feel pain. We all go through trauma. You just have to find a community that loves you for you. And me being at North Shore, I found a community that loved me for me and being authentically myself. So I would say that North Shore is a very family-oriented place. And no matter if you haven't been there in a couple years and you come back, everybody's going to be like, oh my goodness, I miss you, Janae, or oh my goodness, I miss you, Brianna, or oh my goodness, I miss you, Nathaniel, or even Felipe coming into North Shore. At first, I met Felipe while I was at Andrews, and then he ended up going to North Shore. And so the first time I saw him, once he was at North Shore, he was like, Janae, I didn't know you went here. And I was like, yes, I did go here. But even me just seeing him come to an area that he didn't know, and just them bringing him into a community that's new, it showed that, you know, everybody is changing. You know, North Shore is already a diverse group, a diverse place to be in general. So adding somebody that's from an outside coming in and then starting something like he has started with Nathaniel and everybody at North Shore, it shows that, you know, we all can work together. We just have to find a way to work together, if that makes sense. I hope I said everything correctly the way I was thinking it.
Thank you so much, Anea, for sharing the importance of a community that works together. Obviously, I think Bree is living proof of how a community can grow. And I know that Bree, at times, you know, other members of your family have shared issues within Adventism over race, how that's directly affected your family, and how, hopefully, by the grace of God, you know, you guys are still here, still putting in the work, still taking the time to care for others, still taking the time to grow. And lo and behold, North Shore, I think, you know, out of all the churches in Chicago, is certainly the most diverse. And that's something that's very special. And that's why sometimes it can be harder to have these mental health discussions, because within not just, you know, any one minority group, but within almost every single minority group, there is this tension to say, oh, that's not for us. That's for white people. That's not for us. That's for Americans. That's not for us. We're immigrants. We moved here. We don't have to have these struggles. We're just struggling to survive. And if we could do it, then you can do it too. And so I think North Shore definitely is a place where I feel that it's really difficult to have mental health conversations, because a lot of the communities that we come from are places in which these discussions are not tolerated well. And I don't know if anybody has anything to say on that. I don't know if anybody would disagree. But yes, please, if anyone is willing to share their thoughts on that issue. How do you guys feel about the conversations that happen in a multi-ethnic community like North Shore and the issue of mental health?
I mean,
Nathan, sorry.
No, go
Nathan.
ahead, Joanne. Go ahead.
Okay, so Nathan, as you know, my view on this, I've always said it, that it's going to be, North Shore could be a very good model, right, to disseminate with other churches when it comes to this. Because one, it has a multicultural aspect to it, which would, you know, facilitate what I'm trying to say of, you know, community level interventions. And when I say that, at a personal level, you need to be accepted. And when you're not accepted, then there is a myriad of things, of psychiatric issues that play, you know, including what Bria said, you know, the PTSD that people have not, are not aware, like she's bringing awareness to PTSD in, you know, with racism. So the only intervention I can think of really is a community level that can address this issue. And by bringing, what it does, it brings a person to have purpose. And when you have purpose, you're more likely to do everything to your best ability and live to your full potential. So purpose is a social determinant of health, meaning if you address those things such as acceptance, which, you know, PTSD is in that area of the prefrontal cortex that I kind of mentioned. You can Google it. I mentioned this thing so that you guys can like have reference to kind of Google and kind of read about and learn. Because the more you learn, the more knowledge you have, the more perception you have about yourself, the more better you're about to heal. So, so the prefrontal cortex also elicits some of the hormones called like norepinephrine. But whenever you over-release a stress hormone, at one point it stops working because our body is always trying to create balance. And whenever now you need to create that, that hormone, when you need it the most, it's not gonna work well as it needs to work. And that is a problem, because then now that leads to other health factors that will decrease your lifespan compared to other ethnicities, just because you're missing that point. So meaning it has a ripple effect down your line on how you even succeed or how you view yourself and other things you might bring into place. So again, a community, North Shore Church could create this model to address this issue. And I think it is a perfect place to do this.
I completely agree with Joanne.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sorry. I just want to everybody. If you guys haven't already seen, Joanne has definitely posted some comments. That yes, please go ahead. If you want to go be educated more about the subject, please go look up some of the stuff that she shared. Sorry, Felipe, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, thank you, man. Honestly, I just wanted to connect with what Joanne said. I honestly believe that North Shore, man, I'll take these words, and Alyssa's on the line. She's probably listening. She said these words. I don't know if she remembers them. She said that North Shore is a governmental experiment. That's what it seems like, because it's so diverse, not only in name, but in its actual practice. Like you walk into North Shore, you'll see people from everywhere, man, everywhere around the globe. So diverse, so multicultural, and so many different cultural groups. It can be, like Joanne said, the perfect model to, not only, our local churches, but to our whole entire country on what, racial reconciliation and good racial dynamics can actually be in a community, in a small community. Like, if we were willing to take that role onto ourselves and go about it and be about it, I honestly believe that North Shore could play a huge role in that. And I just like to contribute also to what, first of all, I want to congratulate Bree. Thank you so much, Bree, for being so vulnerable and being so open in your talk, in your conversation there. It's definitely not easy stuff to talk about, but believe it that, the young people listening to you right now, we're definitely blessed. And years from now, you'll hear about it. Maybe not now, but years from now, you will. I just want to connect with what she said also, man, because it's huge. Because the biggest terrorizers when it comes to racial prejudice or a disrespect for mental health in my life has been minorities. Because I've been raised in minority groups, I am a minority, especially like minority immigrants, where the reality of your life is two things. If you have work, great. If you're married and have a family, great. If you have work and family, you're good. You don't need anything else. And that includes, mental health. That includes analyzing these social dynamics that make living difficult for us as minorities and other people as well. It's very weird. I remember growing up in the church, a small Latino church, man, and I'll tell you, it's not even only so much about racial bias, it's also about colorism, which is a huge evil that is not addressed enough in our circles, to the point where you can have minorities diss each other based on the shade of their skin or certain features, physical features that they have, maybe their eyes, their hair, their nose. Like, I've grown up as a teenager having like my youth director of my church clown on the fact that my hair was a certain way. Like, I remember him pulling me aside one day in the group of all the friends and being like, yo, guys, this is what I meant when I talked about bad hair. I remember being at church and having the deacon come up to me and say, yo, you got a nice suit on, you look clean, but you got to get rid of that thug hair. That's not welcome here. It's the house of God. You got to get rid of that thug hair. So honestly, this is a huge thing that we need to counter, and North Shore has the capacity, given all of the dynamics that it has, to be able to charge head first against all of these racial biases, racial prejudice, all of these sorts of microaggressions even that come out of a racial bias. We need to address all of these. And I honestly believe with Bree and with Joanne that we have what it takes to tackle that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Felipe. I know we're running out of time. Thank you for reminding us of, despite perhaps some of the challenges that might come along with being in a multi-ethnic community, that it gives us huge potential, huge upside. There was a question in the comments that Sister Rona had shared. I don't know if anyone wanted to answer specifically. Sister Rona was asking how she as a parent can help her children when it comes to maybe discussing or talking or dealing with racial issues. Do any of our speakers want to take that? Alyssa?
Very funny. So I'm just gonna put out there that I do a lot of reading and studying on diversity. That's what I want to do with my life. And I saw your question, Sister Rona, and I wanted to speak to that directly, because I'm also an immigrant who moved here when I was 10 to a certain extent. It's not the point where all of that is, but so I experienced the moment of my parents don't understand what's going on, that kind of thing. And what I will say is perhaps the most important thing you can do is let them know that they're not crazy. America gaslights people of color, in particular Black people, when it comes to what is going on, what is acceptable, what is not. They want you to believe this is normal, that you're supposed to act a certain way around the police and that kind of thing. So is it James Baldwin says that, you know, to be a Black person in America is to have two consciousnesses, which is the reality, which is that you are a valued child of God with immeasurable potential and worth. And you also live in America that hasn't quite figured that out yet, to say it charitably. America is in an abusive relationship with Black people. They do this to us, and they tell us that we deserve it, that we've earned it, that there is nothing else. And so I would start with getting educated about what the racial history is in this country, because that will help you understand, put in context. When you hear the lies, you can go straight to your kid and be like, that thing you heard, it's trash. It came from here. They're trying to do something else. And so that, I think, was one of the things that really helped with my mom, because she works at a public high school, so they had diversity training and she was able to learn a lot of that sort of thing. And so please get educated. Please assure your children that they are in hostile territory, but there is room for them to wiggle, and that no, they're not imagining what they are seeing.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing. I believe now that we're past the 7 o'clock mark, we should transition into our next speaker, but we'll make sure to catch any of the other questions that you guys have posted or shared with us later in the evening. Pastor Felipe, please introduce your dear friend to us for our third segment of this evening.
Man, what can I say about this guy that hasn't already been said, man? A brother, unlike any other, man. I remember back in 2012 when I met this man walking outside of the Washington Adventist University admissions office. And man, from that moment on, we became the closest friends, man. I really appreciate this guy. I really treat this guy like a brother. He's, you know, a graduate of both WAU and AU Theological Seminary. And he's just passionate about young people, guys. You guys, if you don't know Robert Machado yet, Pastor Robert Machado, you're gonna get to know him a little bit tonight. But he's a great dude, loves to interact with young people, and is also very passionate about the mental health journey, because he also has a story dealing with his own mental health and coming into terms with his mental health reality and also his faith reality. And that's what we're going to talk about right now with Pastor Robert Machado. Take it away, my brother.
What's up, North Shore? It's good to be back. Good to see everybody. I just wanted to say, Pastor Felipe, I resonate with what you said about colorism in our communities, and what he's saying is real. I get people talking about my hair, even my own grandma, who is Black. She is Black, but she always be like, yo, you need to cut that hair. And I've just come to a point where I'm strong enough to be like, nah, grandma, I'll do what I want. You know, I'm just going to keep my hair out. I'm going to live the life that God gave me abundantly, and I don't need to live to satisfy anybody else, you know? And I think it just comes to that point. So with that being said, I want to start with this quote that says this: if you're strong, you live. If you're weak, you die. This is a phrase that was spoken in an anime called Rurouni Kenshin, a samurai anime I really liked back in the old days, my 90s. I really love that anime. A lot of great lessons in those stories. And the thing is, yes, if you're strong, you live. If you're weak, you die. That is true of battle and warfare. But it is amazing how in the Christian church, we've seen to subconsciously take that idea and apply it to faith. If you have a strong enough faith, you'll live through anything. If your faith is anywhere near weak, you're gonna die. And then when we see people dying around us, we don't think to care about them. We don't think to ask how they're doing. We don't think to go towards them. We just think, well, they must be weak and they're going to die. This is normal. No, that's an evolutionary perspective, not a Christian perspective. And we need to get that out of the church. And I've seen that. My mom, for example, was someone who would tell me, hey, counseling, psychologists, that's for crazy people, and you don't need that. You just need God. Go read your Bible some more, go pray some more, and you'll be okay. And I just had to accept that, or else I was going to get, hit over the head with a flip-flop. Like, what are you going to do, But it's funny to me now as a theologian, I'm just like, how do you not consider yourself to be crazy? How do you as a human being not recognize that we are broken, we are sinful, we're all crazy folk, And so, yeah, I do need a psychologist. Yeah, I would like counseling. Yeah, because I'm a part of that. But there are people out there in our church who don't think that, and they believe that, hey, if your faith is strong enough, you're going to be okay. Because for some reason, faith is contrary. It is antagonistic. It is counter towards admitting that you have a problem or seeking help. Somehow, if you have faith, you can't seek help. And that just doesn't make sense to me, because if you're sick, you still get medicine. If you're sick, really sick, you still go to a hospital. Why, if I'm mentally sick, if I am immensely, detrimentally anxious and depressed and suffering, why can't I seek a professional about that? If it's not cancer, I can't go seek help. That doesn't make sense to me. In fact, mental health illness might even be worse, because it is completely destructive. If what's happening here in your mental state can destroy you physically and emotionally, and especially spiritually. I do believe that the spiritual part can almost override and empower all your other faculties, but at the same time, it's not going to be complete. It's a holistic health that we need to look for, and mental part is immensely important. What we focus so much on, I think, as Christians, I think this is one of the problems. Here's faith. Let me give you a definition of faith. Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And then we stop right there. We stop at this understanding that faith is just trust, it's just confidence in God, and it's just believing. I believe in the unforeseen realities that this God can bring into existence. Is that powerful? That's powerful. People preach on that all the time. And I love to believe that the same God who parted the Red Sea is the same God who can get you through your depression. I believe in that. But just believing is not enough, and it's not what faith is all about. Let me show you guys what 2 Peter says about faith. And I tell you, when you read about faith, don't just read Hebrews 11:1. Don't even read just this passage. You need to read the whole Bible, the whole system of truth, as Sister G used to say. Sister G meaning Ellen White. She's my favorite sister. And you've got to look through the whole system of truth about topics, because you can't just read one verse and think that's all it is. Because look what 2 Peter says. I'm going to start with verse 2, actually. It says this: grace and peace be multiplied to you in the knowledge of God, of Jesus our Lord, as his divine power has given to us all things that pertain to life and godliness, through the knowledge of him who called us by glory and virtue, by which have been given to us exceedingly great and precious promises, that through these you may be partakers of the divine nature. Peter wants you to partake of the divine nature. But look at this, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. I'm reading the NKJV if you don't know. But here, verse 5 says this, but also for this very reason, partaking of that divine nature, taking on the promises of God, escaping this world and its corruption. But for these very reasons, giving all diligence, you got to be diligent on this, add, supplement your faith with virtue. To virtue, knowledge. To knowledge, self-control. Self-control, perseverance. To perseverance, godliness. To godliness, brotherly kindness. And to brotherly kindness, love. For these things are yours and abound, you will be neither barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For he who lacks these things is short-sighted even to blindness, and has forgotten that he was cleansed from his old sins. Therefore, brethren, look at this, be even more diligent to make your call and election sure. For if you do these things, you will never stumble. Look at that. You will never stumble. That's what Peter is saying from his experience. If you supplement and add these things to your faith and are diligent to practice them daily. Dude, what is that saying to us? That's saying that faith by itself, in terms of this believing and trust factor, that's not what faith is all about. Faith is so much more than that. Faith is all about your virtue, your moral character, how you live and act, your knowledge, your wisdom, the amount of self-control that you exhibit and show, your perseverance, your godliness, the godly nature in you. Do you look like God? And then your brotherly kindness and your love and compassion to one another. If you don't have all those things, your package called faith is not complete. And that's what I understand is the issue. Because everyone is saying, no, if you just have faith, it's going to be okay. And I'm saying no, because you don't even know what faith is. You think faith is just believing, and it's so much more than that. And it takes so much growth and so much time, so much counseling, so much reading. There are so many experiences to be gained to grow your faith. Think about this. Peter. This guy was on a boat in the middle of a storm as he saw Jesus walking by him. And he said, Lord, if it's you, take me out into the waters and call me out. And Jesus said, it's me, come out. Did Peter have faith? Yeah, he did. He believed in that very moment he could walk on water. So he goes on the water, sees himself walking on that water, and then he starts walking towards Jesus. But as he looks back on the boat, little pompous, showing off a little bit, sees the waves, starts getting distracted, you start seeing that some things are getting in the way of said belief because his faith was not complete. He didn't have the self-control to focus on the Lord. His brotherly affection for that moment would disappear to an idea of, man, look how great I am. I'm walking on water with the Lord. There are some knowledge, some wisdom here missing, where if I'm walking on water, then this man in front of me is God, and I don't need to worry about anything, and I can just go to him. But in that very moment, what began to be his truth is that these waves are big and I'm about to drown. And so he drowned in that water. And what does Jesus say to Peter? He says, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? He had faith, y'all. Peter had faith, but it was little, it was incomplete, and it was deficient. Peter knows exactly what is being talked about in the word, and he's saying you need to supplement that faith with a little extra stuff. And I tell you right now that a lot of it can come through counseling, through talking with someone about the issues that you're going to face. Because guess what? When you're dealing with anxiety, when you're dealing with depression, as I have, you're not going to figure out the answers on your own. You're not even going to understand where those things come from. You're going to need help. And I believe that the process of seeking professional mental health is a part of that building up of your faith. It's not counter to your faith. God's going to use those experiences to help grow your faith. There's nothing wrong with that. But for some reason, people like to think, no, no, no. If you're seeking help, there's an issue. And I'm going to tell you right now, never. It's never an issue. There are things in my life I didn't even know about myself. I used to hate people who are incompetent. Just an example. I didn't even know it until an assignment in the seminary by my man, David Salachek. David Salachek sat me down and asked me, why do you not like incompetent people? And his counseling with me pointed me all the way back to those days when I was a little boy with my mom and my dad, who kept pointing out all my faults, calling me names, saying I wasn't competent, I couldn't figure things out, I needed to be better, I needed to be perfect, and they were not forgiving towards me. They were very merciless towards me growing up. And so I became like that towards anyone who's incapable of being competent, because I couldn't be like that with people. And if I couldn't be like that with people, I was going to grow and being an insane, arrogant, merciless, unforgiving pastor. Can you imagine that? Someone who's just so focused on perfectionism and all those things like that. And that there's no way I was going to be able to live and help people out if I didn't fix that with Dr. Silacek in his office, where he told me, Rob, it's okay. Forgive yourself. It's okay. Forgive your parents. It's okay. All that stuff you can let go of. You don't have to be like that. It's okay. Don't let those symptoms breed into becoming a real mental sickness and creating you into someone you don't want to be. It's okay. And finally, through multiple sessions, I was able to relax, be more open, be more loving. I still get annoyed, but hey, I don't have to go off and be a Hulk destroying people because they're not as competent as I think that they should be, you know? And that's just one little thing. There are so many different issues and problems in the form and shape of mental illness that we go through. But hey, why not seek help from someone who has been trained to help you with the brain and the mind and to help you deal with the roots of your past better than yourself? Why would that be counter to God's plan? I believe that, in fact, that is part of God's plan. And God wants you to supplement your faith. He wants you to grow in your faith. And a part of that journey is seeking good counsel. I just want to end with this, because our time is just about up. Proverbs 11:14 says this, where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. It doesn't have to be counter whatsoever. Proverbs is full of things saying, seek advice, seek counsel, seek wisdom. The more you know, there's no way you can lose. And mental health is all about discovering more about yourself. Why not discover yourself, the roots of your problems and issues, and how to take better care of yourself and to grow in your faith with someone who's probably journeyed ahead of you, someone who's been trained in that field, and who can do it better than you can do it if you're just by yourself. I'm living proof of, yeah, it works. And praise God, I'm here, and I'm not some sort of tyrannical monster here anymore. So I thank God for that, and love to be able to talk more, but I'll turn it over to our discussions.
Thank you so much, Pastor Robert. We'll definitely get you for some more intriguing points of view when we're able to have our discussion. I wanted to go back very quickly. We only have like 12 minutes for a discussion here. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about faith, including compassion. And I know it's been an issue at our church. That we've had people come and ask our pastoral team, talk to some of our elders even, and ask, well, why are we talking about mental health? Mental health is, if someone has an issue, that's clearly means that there's something wrong with their faith. We need to be studying the word more, and then we won't have to worry about these mental health issues. And so that type of, conversation is obviously, I perceive it as very dangerous. It's a slippery slope. But what happens when our faith causes us to lose compassion for those who are hurting? What does it do for them and their mental health? But what does it do for us? And I think that's something that we forget. Sometimes we as Christians might lord the privilege of knowing the truth over people who aren't Christian. So I don't know if that's a question others have a response to. I don't know if that's a question you would like to take.
That was a good question. Ask it again. I want to process. I want to dissect that. Ask that question one more time for me. Nate.
Am I connected?
Yeah,
There we go. My bad. Sorry, internet issues. But the question I wanted to ask was specifically on how does a faith that lacks compassion, affect others around us, their mental health, perhaps specifically, as well as us? How does it affect us when we lack compassion for others? How does that affect our mental health? How does that affect our faith?
See, that's just such an amazing thing that someone can truly believe in God, believe in a God of miracles and a God of wonders, can believe in the God who's a part of the human race's story, can believe in everything that he's done, and still believe that it's okay to be uncompassionate towards someone else because they lack some sort of thing. Somehow we believe and we love this God who is unconditional towards us, but we still set conditions towards how we meet and deal with other people. And when we do that, we limit the grace and the power of the gospel in our own lives. And I think that's what happens when we do that, and we leave our faith fragile, we leave it broken, because when it can't be fully utilized and be in that supplementation process of growing in brotherly love and compassion, all those things, it just becomes, like I said, oh yeah, I just believe in God. And then it's like, is that faith or is it belief? Because believing is one thing. Having faith and living faith is another one. And if your faith is destructive, all you're good for is what the Pharisees did, in chaining and yoking others. And then people will stop being able to accept your faith because they'll see that your faith is just a yoke, and a heavy one at that. There's nothing beautiful or restful about that yoke. Christ's yoke was never like that. Christ's yoke was compassionate. This guy believed and had faith in his Father. And if you want to look at what true faith looks like, it is Jesus's faith. But Jesus also dealt with, if you wanted to say something like a mental health sin, because this guy was suffering, this guy was in pain in Gethsemane, but he went through all of that for us. And that never tore him apart from God, that never tore him apart from people. It only strengthened that resolve, if anything. But it's powerful to think that somehow people can still live with a deficient faith and still call that faith.
Anybody else have any other thoughts to share on Pastor Machado's amazing point? Does anybody else have an idea about how we're supposed to respond to these individuals when they make claims about faith and mental health that just don't line up with Jesus' actions and purpose? All right, moving on. Pastor Machado, you talked about seeing, Jesus struggling. You said just now, and I know you briefly mentioned it when you were speaking yourself. How important is that for us as people who say that we are people of Christ, who want to carry on his character, who sometimes will say things like, we have our own cross to carry? How important is addressing our own mental health issues to our fight of faith?
Hebrews, I believe it is Hebrews. Listen, if you want to learn a lot about Jesus, go through Hebrews. You can learn a lot in that book. And I believe it is this. Hebrews 5, it says, he can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is also subject to weakness. Because of this, he has required us for the people, so also for himself, to offer sacrifices for sins. And I believe there's another verse here I'm trying to find. Oh, here it is. This is the right one. 4:15. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. We have someone at this very moment interceding, praying. The Sabbath school lesson this week has been about prayer and the power of prayer. And there is someone praying for us this very moment who knows you, understands your struggles, understands what it is like to be discriminated to be ignored, to be bashed on, to be called that very word of a person who doesn't have a father. He knows what it's like to be in pain and to suffer so much, to be separate from his father. He suffered to the point of death. He knows all of those things, and maybe it's not the same as what Bree was saying, suffering because I'm a black man in this country, and it seems a little different. But I want to believe, as my professor taught me, that in every root problem that sin causes, Jesus felt in this life, he understood. And because he did, he is able to sympathize with us. He cries for us. He will walk with us. He will never say, get over it, get strong, toughen up. He cradles you in your arm. He will wait when you're ready to move forward, and he'll help you through that. And that, to me, is the thing that's been helping me on this whole journey of this whole pandemic and mental health, knowing that, my high priest, the most powerful being in the universe, loves me, is compassionate towards me, and fully understands me, even when I fall in sin, even when I'm the one telling people, hey, you need to toughen up. He's teaching me, hey, be kind to them. They're not like you. And in fact, one day you might go through that yourself. Be kind to them, be kind to yourself. And so it's awesome when we realize, Jesus been there, done that, and still going through that with all of us.
You just inspired a thought in me, to think about the fact that when we think about who the person of Christ is, he said to us that he'll never give us more than we can bear. And so if we do feel like there's something that we cannot bear, then it doesn't mean that, we can bear it, we just need to push through. It means that there's clearly something wrong here. Like, there's something happening in our lives that's not of God, right? And there's been plenty of times, I think many of us, we grow up through our teenage years, we're trying to find ourselves, we're trying to push through. And sometimes it just takes a change of scenery. Sometimes it just takes one little thing. You move schools, you get old enough to, drive or whatever. You get out of that friend group, maybe that might have been toxic to you. And you start to realize that there was something else that was really affecting your mental health that you hadn't noticed previously. And so I think it's important to recognize that, if something is happening, don't feel that just because Jesus says, I'm not going to give you more than you can bear, that means that we should just tough through it as Christians. Sometimes it means asking God, Lord, give me your burden so I can give you mine. But I think that's just a really amazing thought that you just were able to share with me through what you've said, Pastor Machado.
Absolutely.
Don't know if anybody has any questions, but I want to point people back to, we have the anonymous number for questions and raffle entries. And if you don't want to address them now, please submit them so that we can have more for panel discussion that will come at 8. I'm going to let us actually, for the sake of time, start off that right now. And if you have any questions, please hold to the end. It's just 30 minutes more. But Pastor Felipe, I know you have your good friend Jackie here with you. If you could introduce her and introduce our final topic for the evening before we move into our panel discussion. Felipe, please go ahead.
Absolutely, my friend. Well, I met Jackie back at Andrews University, and it was clear that Jackie had all the energy, all the enthusiasm needed to power a building, man. Honestly, she was in the love team of New Life Church, which is one of the worship opportunities that you have at Andrews University. There's a campus with a wide variety, but some people will never tell you this, Ben, but New Life was the jumping place, man. That's what the house of the Lord there was just on fire. And I think that Jackie was one of the active leaders in that group. Super charismatic, super wise about mindfulness, and especially when it came to the topic of mental health. I remember connecting with her a little bit when we had this thing called the Adventist Revolution about a year and a half ago, I think. Back in Indianapolis, everybody was gathered there, and I remember seeing Jackie guiding the crowd through moments of mindfulness and being present and de-stressing and focusing. And I thought that was super cool, super powerful. And I said, man, I got to find somebody that just is experienced in that to have a conversation with the youth today. So I reached out to her, honestly, I think a week and a half ago. It was super last minute, but nevertheless, she said yes, and she's here with us tonight. So Jackie, thank you once again for coming. So take it away. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Pastor Felipe. I just want to thank you for inviting me to talk here this evening. This is such an important conversation, like everybody has emphasized, especially during a pandemic. So as we get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience with mindfulness. So I've always been the type of person who struggles with abstract ideas. So I remember when I first became a Christian, I would hear people say things like, just let go and let God. And I would be like, okay, all right, that sounds great. And they'd just be like, just let go and let God. And I'd be like, that's wonderful, but how? Like, I need a roadmap, I need a list, I need steps, like I need a guide, like give me something. And same thing, I would have an issue with forgiveness. People would be like, you know, you just can't hold on to it. You just got to let it go and you got to forgive. And I'd be like, wonderful, love that. But how? Give me the steps. Like I need instructions. I don't want to hold on to this. Give me the steps. And so I felt the same way when I got introduced to the concept of mindfulness and meditation. I heard terms being thrown around like mindfulness, meditation, manifesting, and I'd be like, these sound great, but what does that mean for me personally? Like, how do these concepts help me individually? And so I do want us to dive into this topic a little bit, but first I want to say I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers on how to manage your personal anxiety and what steps that you should take in your personal path. But I'm here to share the knowledge that has helped me on my own personal journey with anxiety and mental health. And I hope that somebody can gain something from my talk today on how to manage your own personal path. But just know that if something works for me, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you. And that's totally fine because all of our paths are valid and all of our paths are beautiful. So let's first talk about mindlessness. I feel like we should talk about that first before we get into mindfulness. So what is mindlessness? So mindlessness is pretty much what it sounds like. You're not putting too much thought into something that you're doing. The action that you're currently engaging in, you're not really thinking much about it. So another term could be just going through the motions. You know, we hear that a lot in our Christian circles. I just go through the motions. I'm not really thinking about it. It can look like daydreaming. You know, I'm driving a car and I'm not really paying attention to my surroundings. I mean, for the most part I am because I'm on the road, but I'm not fully engaged in everything that's around me because I'm thinking about work or I'm thinking about the conversation that I had 2 hours ago with somebody. You know, the action that I'm currently engaged in, I'm not fully engaged in. It can look like scrolling on social media. You know, I'm kind of just scrolling. I'm not really looking at the fact that my finger is moving. I'm not focused on everything that's around me. I'm just mindlessly scrolling on social media. And so these actions are completely normal. Like it's a part of our everyday life and I do it often, you know, and I think that mindlessness is necessary. I just want to say that again, mindlessness is necessary. Like sometimes I just need to scroll on Instagram for hours. Sometimes I just need it. Sometimes I need to binge watch a show because what I'm dealing with currently is too stressful. So I need to just detach and I need to binge watch a show. And, you know, sometimes I need to allow my mind to daydream about a beach in Fiji because I can't leave my house because we're in a quarantine. So I think mindlessness is necessary. I think the issue comes when mindless activities, they take us away from the present moment and they cause us anxiety. So for instance, I'm scrolling on Instagram mindlessly. I'm just looking at different pictures. I come across a picture of someone who is living their best life on that beach in Fiji where I want to be. And now I'm starting to think about my current reality and I start to realize that I feel a lack in my life. I start to think about, you know, maybe I should be doing things differently. Maybe I need to do things more like this person because they clearly are doing things that I would like to do. And then boom, anxiety. Or I'm laying in bed trying to go to sleep and my mind is daydreaming and I start playing a conversation in my head that hasn't even happened yet. And I'm playing all of these potential outcomes of this imaginary conversation, and then boom, anxiety. And I know that this is something that we do all the time, especially as millennials and as Generation Z. We engage in a lot of mindless activities. But when it starts to cause us anxiety, we need to start taking some step back. We need to start trying to implement balance. So that's when this idea of mindfulness comes into play. So what is mindfulness? If mindlessness is not engaging your mind in the action that you're currently doing, mindfulness is the opposite. So this is bringing one's attention and awareness to the present moment that is happening right here in front of your eyes. So what this does, it allows your mind a break from that anxiety. So if you're focused on what's happening right now, so I am focused right now at my computer and I'm focused on giving this talk, I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about the past. So those anxieties are not in my present moment because I can't focus on them. And so that's what mindfulness does. It gives you a break from those future thoughts of anxiety and those past thoughts of anxiety. So I know some of you are probably like, all right, that's cute, Jackie. That sounds great. But how do I implement that in my daily life? Like, what does that actually look like? Again, these abstract ideas that I personally struggle with. So I'm going to have us do something really quick. So if you're sitting, I want you to put your shoulders back. And I want you to take a deep breath in and hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, and release. We're going to do that 2 more times. Deep breath in and out. On this last one, we're going to breathe. Breathe in, Holy Spirit in. And breathe out. Fear, anxiety, doubt, out. So that is a practice that I have implemented into mostly my everyday life. I try to do some form of deep breathing. And I think the beautiful thing about deep breathing is, one, it's a natural thing that we do anyways. And so bringing your focus on your breathing, again, you can't think about the future. You can't think about the past. You can only think about the fact that you're breathing. You can only think about the fact that your lungs are filling with air, that you're holding and you're counting to whatever number you're counting to, and then you're releasing. So you're only focused on the present moment. Another form of mindfulness that I like to do is stretching. However, I like to stretch and pay special attention to how my body feels while I'm stretching. So if I'm moving my head to the left, I'm engaged in feeling that my neck feels tense. I feel some tension in my neck and I'm just focusing on releasing that tension. If I'm, raising my shoulder, I'm focused on the fact that my shoulder is tight because I carry tension here. And I'm just really honing in on parts of my body and listening to what my body is telling me as I'm stretching. Another thing that I like to do with mindfulness is a body scan. So this is a form of mindfulness meditation. So it's where I will close my eyes and I just do like a quick survey of my body from the top of my head. And I just scan down and just become aware of any tension that I'm feeling in my body. Like, oh, my neck is feeling a little sore. My shoulders feel a little tense. I'm feeling a little tingly feeling in my fingers. And it's just becoming aware of your body because our bodies talk to us. But because we're so busy, sometimes we don't listen. So that is another form of mindfulness that I have tried to incorporate in my everyday life. Another thing that I've been trying to do, and I think it's so intriguing, and it might be just me, I think it's fun, examining my food as I'm eating it. So I know sometimes I like to sit and I like to watch a show while I eat, which is perfectly fine. I think it's great. But sometimes I just want to look at my food, especially if I cooked it. If I made it, I like looking at it and just watching the steam come up from the plate. And, as I put the food on the fork, I'm just looking at the different colors. I'm looking at the different textures. And it allows me to enjoy my food so much more because I'm just taking the time to just look at it and to just fully be present in the moment. And another very important form of mindfulness that I think is helpful is personal affirmations. We have been told time and time again, like Bree mentioned earlier, we have been told by society that we are not enough. We have been told by Christian traditionalism that we are just sinful and we are wretched, which is true to an extent. We are sinful in nature. However, God looks at us and sees us as valuable and sees us as beautiful. And so to combat those messages that we are constantly faced with, we need to start affirming ourselves. So I have a list of affirmations that I try to say every day. And what that does is, in the moment, as I'm articulating those different affirmations to myself, as I'm telling myself I am intelligent, as I'm telling myself I am capable, as I'm telling myself that I am confident, I am not focused on the fact that I have a call in an hour. I'm not focused on the fact that I had an awkward conversation with someone yesterday. I'm not focused on all of those different anxieties. What I'm focused on in the moment is reading these affirmations and affirming who I am as a child of God. And so there are a lot of health benefits of mindfulness, specifically deep breathing and the meditation and being in the present moment. And I'm just going to list off a few of those health benefits. So specifically deep breathing, which is my favorite. Deep breathing helps to reduce your heart rate, which helps lower blood pressure. It increases oxygen to the brain. It helps with clarity of thought, which then leads to better decision-making skills. So that is a direct way that you can attempt to try to work through your anxiety in the moment. And so today, I hope what you got from my talk is that balance is key. If you decide to start trying to implement some of these practices in your daily life, if you miss a day, it's fine. Don't beat yourself up. If you miss 4 days, it's fine. Or even if you try some of these things and you feel like they're not fitting for you, that is completely okay. And everybody's path is different and everybody's path is valid. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for sharing about mindfulness today. I know that this is something that, particularly for me, is a difficult conversation to have with myself, because I'm always looking toward the future and I'm always trying to observe the past. And I know that's something that not just true for me, it's true for many people. And I think you're absolutely, you speak well, obviously, and you're able to really pinpoint the importance of allowing ourselves to understand that who God is needs to be reflected in us. And God is not someone who concerns himself with the past or the future. He sees all things. And if we could see all things the way he did, we wouldn't have the same concerns. But we're not, because we're human and we do. And so just so important to take some time and try to sit in who we are with what we are for just an hour or two a day. So thank you for sharing all these helpful tips. I know that there are so many different ways that people have already done their best to say, oh, faith needs to be connected to these things. But honestly, a lot of these things are things which people do whether or not they believe. And so for everyone who's out there, don't consider this always necessarily a faith exercise. This isn't something that you always have to do hand in hand with a Bible study or coffee in the morning while you're doing a devotional. It can be just something you take on the time to do for your own. And I know that trying to put some of these things into practice, I noticed some of the things you said and things I've already heard other people say, has definitely improved my ability to breathe, my ability to go and work out and stay healthy during the pandemic. So I think it's great that, you're sharing with everybody here. Everybody, if you guys have any questions for Jackie, once again, I'm going to direct you to our number, which Ilyash is going to post again underneath. I did want to ask particularly a question that perhaps relates more to the faith aspect side of the mental health, since, these things go hand in hand. But how do you feel mindfulness, as you said, it's so important for our mental health. How do you feel mindfulness helps us as people of faith? And also with being able to connect to people who might have different experiences than us?
Yeah, I think mindfulness, I think the most beautiful thing about mindfulness is it's taking time to understand ourselves. I think as Christians, we've been taught that we need to serve, 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 oftentimes at the expense of our own health, at the expense of our own mental health and our own physical health, which I think it's necessary. Service is necessary, but mindfulness gives us a chance to figure out what we are going through, what our bodies are going through, what we need, what we desire. And so I think as you spend more time being mindful, there's just an outpour of wanting to help others or being able to recognize in other people some things that may be going on. And so I feel like as I've been more mindful, I've noticed that I've been able to understand people better because I'm able to meet them where they are because I've met myself where I am. And so I think that that's been the biggest takeaway for me is I think sometimes we think that if we spend time with ourselves and if we try to nurture ourselves and love ourselves that we're being selfish. But I think that we're so interconnected with one another that I think it's actually harmful to not love ourselves and to not focus on ourselves. So I think there's just a natural outflow of the more I spend time with myself, the better I get to know myself, the more I can interact with other people in a healthy way because I'm able to notice my triggers. If somebody says something to me and I'm not aware that something like that will trigger me, then I'm not able to engage in the conversation in the best way possible. So yeah, I would say that's been helpful.
Thanks. I think that really connects well what you said with what some of Pastor Robert was saying earlier. You kind of, pointed to the fact that we have to meet people where they're at, and that requires us being able to meet ourselves where we're at. And that obviously connects to Christ meeting us wherever we are in every moment. And so I think that's just so important for, recognizing our faith. I think a lot of times young people feel like they need to get somewhere before they can have a conversation. They need to get somewhere before they can have a faith. And that's absolutely not true. You just have to start the journey. I wanted to point out that, yes, we actually have all of our prize slots open for a number. So if you want to go ahead and try to submit yourself for a raffle for prizes, which Felipe is going to pass out at the end, please go ahead and contact the number that Elias has posted. I know that we're going to transition into our general discussion soon, but I didn't know if there was any other questions people had particularly for Jackie before we move into that general portion. Obviously, Jackie, you'll have a healthy say in the input for our general conversation. So I don't know if anybody has any questions they want to ask now, any interesting points they took away.
Yeah, I think some person just texted a question to us. So we'll try to read that question. Elias, are you able to help us? Okay, so I'll ask Jackie a question. Honestly, it wasn't until maybe a year and a half ago, or maybe a year ago, max, that Jackie, I was introduced to this idea of mindfulness because, and there's a huge movement about it. I didn't even know it was this big, like online. Before, in my lack of real education about it, and in my ignorance of it, like the whole traditional Christian understanding of meditation is really clouded and really weird. Like I'm sure you've met people that you talk about mindfulness and meditation to as Christians, they're like, what? No, that's that weird Eastern stuff, I don't mess with that. They don't know what they're talking about, but they just summarize it as that. And they say stuff like weird Eastern, almost as if our faith is not Eastern, as in Middle Eastern. But anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. But how has your reaction been to comments such as that? What do you tell people, Christians especially, that come up to you and talk kind of negatively about the idea of mindfulness and meditation, or just toss out the comment of, hey, just pray about it?
Yeah, so I personally, and I thank God for this, I have not experienced any Christians that have come to me and, been like, you're doing that weird stuff. You're a little new age. I haven't encountered any comments like that. I've only, heard about other people's experiences. But I think for me, a large part of like preparing myself for when I do encounter that, because I'm sure I will, it's just embracing that this is my journey and that this is what has helped me on my path. And I think that's just so important to emphasize. Like, my path doesn't have to look like your path, and that's fine. And I think another important thing that we need to start doing as Christians, especially when regarding mental health, is setting boundaries. If I engage in a conversation with someone and we're going back and forth to the point where there's no headway, where we're not going in a direction, it's okay for me to be like, I respect your opinions, but I don't think this is a conversation that I want to continue to engage in with you. But I just want to let you know that I appreciate your perspective, and leaving it at that. There's no disrespect there. It's setting a personal boundary, because we all express our faith in different ways. And I think that out of fear, we try to invalidate other people's expressions of faith. And I think that that could be really helpful. And another thing, like you mentioned, Pastor Felipe, is the fact that our faith and the Bible itself is an Eastern book. So a lot of Eastern practices are actually biblical, but the ways that they've been interpreted and the ways that they've been portrayed have been in ways that are, more Western, because we live in Western society. And so I think, just being settled in my personal faith and knowing that this might not work for everyone, and people might have their own opinions, and that's completely fine. It's not my job to convert everybody to the way that I specifically practice my faith. And just being okay with that.
I kind of had a follow-up question. I didn't know quite how to word it, but maybe I can take some time to do that now. I know that for myself as an extrovert, and for many extroverts that I know, oftentimes in this culture, we take on such a litany of perspectives that it does start to affect who we are too. So, sometimes I definitely see that there's a tendency in myself to be overbearing, and it's something that I have to check and balance. But at the same time, like, I operate on extremes. Sometimes it's also to the point where I don't notice how all the things that are surrounding me, because my personality is so extroverted, are starting to affect me and my identity. Do you have any tips on mindfulness for one to stay centered in who they are? Like, we have to be confident enough to not go and hurt other people and attack other perspectives, but we also have to be confident enough to maintain who we are. And do you know anything about mindfulness for that?
First of all, I just want to let you know, extrovert over here, team extrovert. So I think the thing that has been the most helpful for me is the last thing I mentioned was personal affirmations. Now, my journey with personal affirmations has been interesting. So I've been using affirmations for years now, but it wasn't until this past year where I've been able to affirm myself and actually believe it. And I think it's because for a while I felt like I was lying to myself. I felt like these things weren't true that I was saying about myself. And it was because I hadn't confronted the perceived truth about myself. So if I'm trying to affirm myself and be like, I am intelligent, but I still haven't faced the fact that I actually don't think I'm intelligent. If I haven't faced that is the way that I think about myself, that if I keep telling myself I'm intelligent, it's not really going to override anything, because the way that I view myself isn't there yet. And so once I face that current truth about myself, I actually don't think I'm intelligent. I was able to then say, no. I know for a fact that God created me with intelligence. I know for a fact that I have done all these things in the past that have shown me that I'm smart. Now I can say these things to myself and actually believe them to be true and use them as a tool to help my mental health. And I think another part, especially as an extrovert and a recovering people pleaser, let me tell you, people pleaser over here. I think it's important to take time to journal. I journal very often, and it's a tool that I use to just simply express myself. Like, sometimes I don't even have anything that I'm specifically writing about. I'm just writing words on a paper. Like I'm just sitting there and a word comes to my mind. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna write that on the paper. Or I decide to sit down and be like, I'm feeling anxious. So let me ask myself, why am I feeling anxious? And take time to sit with myself. And so I think it's really finding ways that you feel most, the way that you love yourself the most. Like we all have different love languages. So mine is quality time. So I need to make sure I need to make sure that I'm spending that quality time with myself. And the second one for me is acts of service. So I need to be doing things for myself and taking that time with myself. So I think that, yeah, those would be some tips for personal getting to know yourself.
I really like that you brought the love languages into it. That's been something that like has been coming up in my life for the last year and a half more and more. And one of the things I've noticed about myself, because I'm extroverted, I'm very good at giving words of affirmation. And I can definitely tell that for you, because you speak so well, that it's true for you. But to be able to give that back to yourself is also important with the personal affirmation. So thank you for the advice that you're giving me. I know I'll definitely use it, the advice that you're giving all of us. I'm sure everybody here has been touched by that. I do want to give the chance for other speakers to come in. If you guys are still on the line, please be ready to join. Jackie, please stay on with us. We do have a few minutes that we want to do a Q&A. I have some questions prepared that I'd like to begin the discussion with, which will kind of touch on some of all the different things that we've talked through today. And so if you're on the line, Rob, if you're on the line, Brianna, if you're on the line, Alyssa, please join us once again. A friendly reminder, we still have 3 spots open for the raffle. You guys have responded. You guys want to grab. Felipe, what are the prizes today? Why don't you do that before we move into our Q&A portion?
Man, I feel like I gotta give that game show voice. You know, the one that they do in game shows to reveal the prizes?
And now.
And Nate, I'm telling you right now today, every participant is gonna get an online gift card from Pastor Felipe of up to a significant amount of dollars, because pastors make a lot of money. So make sure that you send in your questions right now. The first 2 people right now to send their questions are gonna get a $10 gift card from Pastor Felipe. So listen, you gotta shoot that question on the text right now, anonymous text. 3 people so far have already gotten their gift card. They're already celebrating. They got the money. They got the Pastor Felipe money. Will you? 2 more questions, 2 more slots. All right, go ahead, Nate.
All right, this one is for Jackie. I know some of the others are coming on the line, and I'm sure others can try and tackle it if they'd like, but I think this one's specifically for you, Jackie. Are there other examples of mindlessness that you can tell us about? And how do we balance out doing the mindless things with the mindful things? That's a question that we have anonymously from I don't know who.
I appreciate that. So I think, I gave some examples, but I think any activity that you do that you're not putting thought in. So I gave the example of driving, it's kind of just we naturally especially if we're driving in our own personal neighborhood, we're not really thinking about the turns that we're taking. We're kind of just taking them. Riding a bike. You're riding a bike, you're not really thinking about your feet moving on the pedal. You're not really thinking about how your hands are moving as you're taking turns. Your body's just naturally doing it. And so anything where you're not focused in on the action that's taking place, but rather your mind is thinking about something else, that would be considered mindlessness. And so I think balance comes in, especially since, like I said, we are so accustomed to doing things mindlessly. We need to set a time aside specifically for mindfulness. And so it's not something that we are just going to start doing if we're not intentional about it. So I know what's worked for me is in the mornings, I wake up, I make my matcha tea, add a little coconut milk in there, got to make it a little sweet with some maple syrup. And what I do is I take time to just breathe. I'm sitting there with my matcha tea and my eyes are closed and I'm taking time to just breathe. I also like to use meditation apps that have like guided meditation. Sometimes it's visual, just like imagining, a different scene. Sometimes it is affirmations, and so that has been helpful on my journey of meditation. But it's really just setting time aside. Like if I can set time aside to watch 50 YouTube videos in a row, and I have done that during this pandemic, and I will not receive any judgment. So if I have time to set aside to scroll on TikTok for hours, and we all know TikTok videos, they're only about a minute long. So if I'm on there for hours, I've watched a lot of videos. If I can set aside time to do those things, then it's just as easy to set aside time to be mindful. And to, you know, you might even need to put little sticky notes around your room. You might need to set an alarm. And I don't think that it has to be these grand things that we do. Like, I'm going to sit here and be mindful for 3 hours. Like, that's not realistic. Also, that's tiring. If I'm having to focus for 3 hours, that's a lot. But just starting with small things. Like, you know what? For the next week, I'm going to take 3 minutes to just sit here and breathe. I'm just going to take 1 minute to sit here and breathe. Or I'm just going to take 1 minute to sit here and write out everything that I'm feeling right now. And so I think if we start on, you know, these small gestures, that before we know it, we are just implementing more balance in our lives.
Thanks so much for sharing, Jackie. I'm going to open up our panel discussion, and any one of you can take it. It's going to harken back to talking a little bit about the pandemic, perhaps, and the time that we're in, but certainly valid for everything that you guys have said. What new mental health challenges do you speakers anticipate for our future? And we do have a changing climate, whether or not due to COVID and the pandemic, life is changing. So what are the new mental health challenges? What do you think is going to be the next big mental health challenges, or the next big set of mental health challenges for our culture and society? Anyone, all for it.
Nate,
Go ahead.
I think for me, one that we're going through right now, and it's the issue that keeps everyone from opening businesses and schools and things like that, and it's going to continue on, is for the first time, I think, it's always been there, but I think for the first time, people have now realized that there's a chance that tomorrow won't come for them, and that they might die the moment they get this disease. I think death has just become a little bit more real. It's just around the corner. And so that's going to be a challenge now living with the fact that, wow, I could die from this thing. I could just die anyways. Well, how am I going to live? And that fear is starting to creep into people's minds, is starting to get to them. And again, some people out there are just saying, well, you know what? We just got to tough it all out so our country doesn't fail and the economy doesn't fall apart. But you're saying we're going to sacrifice the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Are you okay with that? So I think that's going to be a mental health challenge, recognizing the fact that, yeah, whether you put the mask on or not, whether you wash your hands or not, or whether you stay in your house or not, you are dealing with this everyday stress of, I might die or cause someone else's death. And that is not something that we are ready to deal with or face the reality of, because it happens every day. But here in America especially, we didn't think about it as much. And I think now it's right here in the forefront.
Thank you so much for sharing. I definitely see, you know, we as a nation we're showing our hand, some of our coping mechanisms to dealing with this trauma. Some of us we retreat into our own homes and we never see the light of day. Some of us try and go and say, oh, we'll just deal with it. We'll take the hit so that our economy can, you know, come right around the corner again. And it just shows that there are these very human sides to this space, this community that we have. And it's something that we have to keep in check and think about. So thank you. I definitely agree. Death is a big thing for our society right now, especially in the midst of what is practically a plague. Do any of our other speakers want to tackle that question? What new mental health challenges does today bring, does tomorrow bring?
So I had something I wanted to say.
Go ahead.
Somebody, I think I read somewhere, they were talking about spoon theory. You guys heard of that? It's the idea that basically on any given day, I'm going to pick a number, that you have 5 spoons. And so like one thing would be for work, 1 spoon's for work, 1 spoon is for like your relationship and so forth. And so the idea is the more things going on in your life, if you have like a learning disability and you're in school, like that's another spoon. And so what we do is we spend our time trying to, how do I say this? To manage the load, right? That's kind of the thing. And so they're like, they mentioned, for example, that today it might be okay that somebody cut you off in traffic, right? Because you had an extra spoon, you only fill up 3 regularly. But the next day, you had an argument with your girlfriend. And so you're almost out of spoons, right? And maybe it's raining that day. So now you're thinking about that too. And so we kind of break down because there's another thing. The pandemic is like a spoon and a half. For some of us, it's 2 whole spoons. And we have to now figure out how to manage with the same amount of space, resources, time. What do we do with these other things? So I do fear a lot. If mental health was a thing that you would invest money in and you were, rapacious like that, now would be the time to do that, because we're going to need so many more people to help people walk through those mindfulness moments, because it's not just it's not just that. It's like you said, it's being able to notice that you're triggered, to notice that you're uncomfortable, that you are feeling overwhelmed. So I like I said, I tremble just because there's going to be a lot less patience. There's going to be just a lot less bandwidth for all us to deal with each other, because now every time you leave the house, it's, oh my gosh, the mask, and wait, did I touch this? And now I have to go wash my hands again because I'm going to see grandma and she needs this, that, and the other. So we do need to be, I think, more intentional about talking to even children about how are you managing the load right now? Like, let's take a minute and literally just, the most emotional developed child, I remember I literally babysat a child once who would literally say, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. I'm gonna go take a nap. He was like 2. And I was like, I am not nearly that in tune with my mental health well-being. Who taught this kid? But we are going to have to start doing that and asking other people, how's your load going? And that's another thing that helps with mindfulness. Jesus himself, and this is how I would answer that question about people talking about the Eastern mysticism sort of thing about it. Jesus himself was very mindful. Okay, Jesus gets called by Jairus to heal his daughter, and on his way there, the woman with the issue of blood touches him, and Jesus is like, nope, we are not leaving till I figure out where my power went. And meanwhile, this 12-year-old is dying. And I know that sounds like a very dangerous thing for us to say. Jesus, of course, knows things. I don't. But you can see in that moment that he was like, we are staying in this moment, and we are finding out what has gone on here. And incidentally, I would imagine that a man watching that happen, where Jesus heals somebody without him like even knowing, the Bible literally just says power went out of him and he was like, whoa. That would help when you get home and realize your 12-year-old is dead. Now you look at this man and go, you just healed somebody without thinking. Can you help me with my 12-year-old? So you'd be surprised to know the benefits of mindfulness, even in weird situations where you think it's inconvenient. Doesn't make sense.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any answers to the question? I do know we have a question on the line from one anonymously, not one that I've come up with, that I think we might want to have answers. So if anybody has any points to make for our previous question, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, we have actually a pretty serious question from one of our youth, I believe. I'm not sure, but basically the question that they asked is, how can I control my anxiety when it gets really high? I think a more relevant question, especially for young people who are stepping into that life where things start to become higher anxiety. Any of our speakers, perhaps one of our 2 who have not yet offered any thoughts for this round of discussion? Jackie, Brianna, how
I can take that one. What I do and what I've learned is move. If you feel it building up, move. Go for a walk, dance, sing, go jog, just keep yourself physically busy, and it'll just flush right out of you. Because if you just sit there, it just pents up and pents up and pents up. It's like shoot a bottle and then eventually explodes. So release the cap as it shakes and just walk. Do something to keep you physically busy, and it'll distract you mentally. And slowly but surely, you'll forget that you were having a panic attack in the first place. It's another technique for grounding is like assess yourself. Who are you? What are 5 things you can touch? What are 4 things you hear? 2 things you can take. Something like that to like have you back in control of your body. Because as someone who experiences panic attacks daily, I can tell you that losing yourself is easy. Like at a drop of a hat, you can just spiral. But if you ground yourself and get back in tune with you, controlling one day, no, it's nothing to beat yourself over because you're learning. Just figure out what works for you. And as you're grounding yourself, you can figure out what triggered you, why it triggered you, write it all down, and then slowly but surely you can work towards being 100% in control of it.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. First of all, the sensing and grounding yourself is so important. So Bree, thank you for bringing that part up. Something else that I've tried to start doing is a priority list. So I usually operate by doing a to-do list, but since this pandemic has happened, I needed to shift to a priority list. So what I do is I write down everything that I need to do and everything that's running in my mind in terms of like tasks that need to get done. And I'll have this whole list and I'm like, okay, what is the most pressing thing on this list? Like, what is the one that's due today? Like if it's an assignment or if it's like a responsibility for something, what is one that needs to get done today? And I pick maybe 2 or 3 things that I need to get done for today. And I don't worry, or I try not to worry about the rest of those things on the list until tomorrow when I reevaluate the list again. So that's been a way that helps me with when those moments come and I'm just like, I am so overwhelmed. I don't know how I'm going to get all this done. So yeah, that's been super helpful. And I think another thing, which kind of ties into the previous question, I think what I've noticed is we're going to have these same mental health issues that arise, but I think they're just going to manifest in different ways and they're going to manifest more intensely. Like the question, what do I do when my anxiety is so intense? I've experienced anxiety during this pandemic in ways that I've never experienced before. I've had anxiety my whole life, but it started to manifest in physical symptoms and it started to manifest in me crying without notice. I cry a lot and I'll be the first one to tell you I'm a crier and I accept my crying, but I started to cry without notice. Like all of a sudden I'm just crying and that's usually not me. So I think we're going to start noticing anxiety manifesting in different ways. So I think that's another way to manage your anxiety is noticing how it's manifesting in different ways and also just honoring yourself. And like Bree said, not beating yourself up. Like my anxiety is stemming from a valid place. I'm not just having anxiety because I'm crazy. I'm not having anxiety because of any of other reasons. I'm having anxiety because I've been triggered, and whatever triggered me, obviously it had some kind of importance in my life, and that's okay. So coming to grips with your anxiety and not looking at it as something that is crippling you, or something that is a part of you that is not valid or that is not important. So yeah.
So for me, there are 2 things that I've been doing, I think for the last 10 years that have helped me to overcome my anxiety. And the first off, if you've ever played video games like Galaga or something like that, and you see all the little enemies coming on your screen and you just start stressing out because you got 10,000 little guys coming at you, you don't know what to do, and you're just trying to shoot them all down. That's how I imagine. I'm a dreamer. I'm a very imaginative person. I'm an introvert who lives in his head. So I look at all the stress factors coming into my mind and I see them coming. I'm like, okay, I'm going to focus on each one by one. And so I start picking and shooting them down as I'm dealing with them with my daily tasks. But I always remind myself, stop looking at them as so many and start focusing on them one by one. And that helps me kind of focus myself, because then my biggest stress issue is seeing too much. And like, oh, I can't handle all that. Sometimes big picture people struggle by focusing on the big picture too much and just zoom in on the details a little bit. Come out, zoom in, come out, zoom in. So that helps me to focus. The other one, and the biggest thing, is what God gave me in 1 Peter 5:6-7, that says, humble thyself under the mighty hand of God, that he might exalt you at the right time, casting, throwing all of your cares and your anxieties upon him because he loves you. And that verse, when God gave it to me and kept giving it to me, it just became very clear. Robert, you have anxiety issues and you need to keep praying about them. You need to keep casting them. You need to keep throwing them at me. And I tell you, if the cure didn't come on the first day, I've literally spent months telling God the same issue at least 100 times a day. Like, just even now, I could have been praying 10 times about the thing because it would not leave my mind. But as it became a daily thing, now stress factor, anxiety comes in, boom, I already know where to send it, because then I do not carry the burden on my shoulders anymore. It's no longer stress in me. I've given that to God. I trust in him for that, and I've cast it. And I know that one day, whenever it's going to be, he's going to handle that. But until then, I humble myself. I stop focusing on myself. I stop focusing on my inability to handle things, and I give it to him. And once I started living that truth, man, I have never had as much peace as I've had in these last 10 years as I've been doing that. And I truly believe, and I said that at that week of prayer, when we take the word of God and really believe in it and live it out, we can experience the treasures and the riches of the graces and blessings of God here today, right now. The kingdom of God is here and is at hand. We need to choose to live it.
Amen, amen. I'd also want to point out, we do have two other pastors who are in this call. JB, if you have comments, Felipe, if you have comments, feel free to pop in at any time. One of the things that I think is on my heart to share is that I think sometimes, very particularly, males have an issue talking about mental health issues, sharing with others. So I would just encourage that for all those who are watching, who are males, maybe we don't have that many, but for also those of you who have a lot of male friends, encourage your brothers to be able to talk and open and share. It's okay to cry. It's okay to break down something. It's okay for men to be mindful. Thank you, Jackie, for bringing that topic discussion to us. And so I think it's very important for me, I know, to open up with my friends and family, and I know it's been important to me to be able to have brothers in my life who are willing to share with me when they're having an anxiety attack, a panic attack, and being able to talk through with them. It provides a relief that they've never had before, because we live in a society where where males don't know the joy it is to be able to share a burden with someone else. So that's what I would encourage people to be able to do. We have a follow-up question to the last one. It goes hand in hand, I think. And the question is, can someone have both high and low anxiety? Can someone have both high and low anxiety? I'm not sure if I entirely understand the question, but I don't know if that's something maybe our speakers or our pastors here would want to think through.
I could probably answer that. There are times where I do feel that my anxiety is at its worst, but yet I still feel okay. I still feel some type of grounded. And it's like, I don't know why. It's like, I can feel like I'm about to spiral, but yet I can still function. So it is possible to feel high and low at the same time. It's your body's way of, okay, we've been through this before. It's natural, it's a normal thing that occurs, but yet we're still feeling this. I can tell you I've experienced anxiety and depression at the same time, and those are both highs and lows. I've been at my lowest with depression, and I've been at my highest with anxiety, where it's like I feel like all I want to do is just be in bed, but yet I still feel jittery and I need to move. Or I feel like I'm about to jump out a window, but yet it's like I'm sitting there and I'm crying at the same time. So it's possible. It's confusing. It feels like you're being pulled apart. It's tug of war going back and forth. But keep with the grounding. you recognize that you have high anxiety, and you recognize that you have low anxiety. And that's the first step. You've recognized that. The next thing to do is why am I feeling high and why am I feeling low? What can I do to bring my high anxiety down? What can I do to bring myself at ease? That's how I feel on that.
Thank you, Brianna. Does anybody else want to tackle that question?
Yeah, I really like what Brianna just said right now. And I think it also connects a lot, Nate, with what Jackie said previously. The whole idea of the body scan exercise, I think it's something that all of us need to incorporate in our daily living, especially when we're stressed, to really sit back and really have a conversation with ourselves, to be able to open up with ourselves and say, hey, can you elaborate to me why you are feeling this way right now? Like, have a conversation almost as if you were like having a sit down with yourself, like, mind, can you clarify to me what's the root of this anxiety? What's the root of this stress? Where does it stem from? Why is it happening now? And really be like, courageous and willing to ask those questions. And honestly, take that time to really have that moment with yourself. I honestly believe that we can be honest with ourselves. Oftentimes we struggle to be honest with others because it's a little bit more difficult. But, if we can practice being honest with ourselves and opening up to ourselves, I believe that when those moments of high anxiety, those moments where we just feel like we can't like really relax, we feel so tense, or our jaw is clenched, our fists are just like, rolled up in like a fighting position or something, we're just feeling like not in the mood to relax. I think that if we have those moments that we really like try to self-evaluate, the root of our stress and our anxiety, I think that it can go a long way. It's going to be a process because it's not something that, happens night to day if you're not used to this. But if you put this act to practice with more frequency, I'm sure that your body will be more at ease to be able to understand the root of its stress and to be better willing to release it once it acknowledges it,
Thanks so much, Felipe. I think all those answers, are really solid. I think this conversation about anxiety, it allows us just for young people to recognize this isn't a taboo topic for church. It shouldn't have ever been, and hopefully they don't feel like it is anymore. Speaking of other taboo topics, something that I'm very proud of North Shore for doing, and I have to thank the pastoral team for that, is tackling the issue of race relations in America. And that's something that's been going on in the last couple sermons, and I know we're going to continue doing so as we go on. And I think one of the questions that I had prepared was, how are the conversations about race relations important for our mental health? But something that struck me as we kept on going on tonight is, what are the actions that we can take to support the mental health of our brothers and sisters who are oppressed, specifically our Black brothers and sisters in America?
That is a loaded and heavy question.
Yes.
I think one of the main things that can be done is, which a lot of us I think have been doing, is using our voices to advocate for people who have been oppressed. And so for me, as a light-skinned Black woman, I have faced racism, but it's not to the same degree as someone who has darker skin than me, because we do have colorism within our community. So it's using my privilege to speak on behalf of people who are really going through it right now. And so whether that's using our social media platforms, whether that is challenging people in our families, having tough conversations, just really using our voices. Another thing that I've personally done is I recognize that in my community, especially during a pandemic, it's hard to really be with our community, our friends, and things of that nature. We have the power to create the community and the connections that we feel are lacking. So what I believe it was the Holy Spirit. The idea that came to my mind was to start a mindfulness meditation group specifically for Black people, where we meet every week on Zoom and we just begin to spend time with ourselves and understand ourselves And so that was a way that I was like, how can I directly support my community during this time and use my voice and use my person and my passion to support my community. So I think if we just take time to think about our giftings and to think about, you know, the areas that God has blessed us in, and try to start using those to speak on behalf of other people who don't have as large of a voice, unfortunately, in this country, I think that we'll be surprised with some of the things that God starts to reveal to us.
Thank you, Jackie. Does anybody else want to tackle that question? I know it's, as Jackie says, a very difficult one to begin on, but I do think it merits discussion.
For me personally, I say the first thing to do is listen. That's the first thing. And not listen to speak, but listen to understand. Like, why are you feeling this way? You know, what happened? You know, do you want to talk about it? You know, and just listen. That's the most important thing you can do. Because if you just constantly talk over that person, they feel like they can't speak. You know, they feel like they're trapped. That it's like, okay, you're not going to listen. You're not going to help. So what's the point? And then you might be that person to throw them over the edge. One of the most important is to listen and educate yourself. Even if you can't relate to what they've gone through, or you can't personally connect, the best thing you can do is listen, because sometimes they're not looking for someone to give them advice. They're looking for someone who would actually take the time out to listen to them and make them feel valid and make them feel loved.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to go one step further this question. I'm going to make it very specific, actually. One thing that I've noticed about North Shore being such a multi-ethnic church is that, given the fact that we're fairly large for an Adventist church and being in the city, is that we tend to group off. We tend to click off. It's something that happens everywhere you go. Anytime you have a large organization, you're going to group off and click off. And oftentimes it does happen by race. I've noticed it in my college. Obviously, that's not the topic today. But how do churches with different communities, which occasionally do, or perhaps very often do, click off into different racial groups, how do we overcome those barriers as a community? How do we allow those communities to openly be able to, as Bree said, listen to each other, as Jackie said, speak out for each other? How do we overcome those barriers? Despite the fact that we're a church, we constantly show our actions to be different than what we say. We talk about diversity, but we only spend time with the brothers and sisters who look like us, talk like us, and think like us. How do we overcome those barriers?
Nate, the way I've been tackling this issue right now and throughout these last few months as a pastor of a Brazilian church, it's been tough because I have to explain to, and I'm going to say this because I can say this, I have to explain to these immigrants what African Americans are going through in this country, why it's relevant, why it's important to protest, why they need to do this. And I have to explain to them, educate them with American history, with the Bible, explain to them that the racism that they know of in Brazil is different than what the racism in America looks like. And it's even worse. And they don't understand that. They just think, well, if they could just work harder to show themselves as better people and can rise up, they'll be accepted. And I think that's a very South American mentality, and educate them to understand that there are people who will never accept you no matter how high you rise up, because they just simply look down on you. And so the educational process has been difficult. And I think my brother-in-law, who is an African American from Minnesota, I think he been being a part of my family now, him sitting down at my table, eating with us, talking with us, I think that's helped expose my family to what it looks like to live with an African American, because we don't do that every single day. And that there are normal people. There are people just like us who think and breathe just like us. They're not different in any sort of way. And I just think that, so even in our church as Brazilians, with our colorism and our cliques in our church, I don't think we just do enough life together. I don't know how it is in North Shore if members live far apart from one another and things like that. But I just wonder if we would spend more time doing life, going out to eat together, being a part of activities, being church together. I really wonder if we wouldn't be willing to fight for our brothers and sisters and speak up for them, because we don't see them as just the members who sit on the pew in our church, but we actually see them as family members who we live with and eat with and talk with every single day and who we love. And so I think that is something where we are already isolated and divided because we just don't, these people aren't a part of my life. They're a part of my church, but they're not a part of my life. So it's not so important to me. And I think that's something that our churches need to work on, integrating people in life and not just in a church service.
Cool.
Thanks for sharing, Pastor Machado. Felipe, sorry, do you have a follow-up comment to that?
Yeah, I have a follow-up comment to that. Thank you, brother. Mentioned that was a great comment, by the way, because you know, him and I, we can speak to the Brazilian reality because we're both Brazilian. But honestly, I completely understand where you come from, Rob, is that racial diversity does not equate to racial reconciliation. Just because a place has people of multiple backgrounds and multiple skin colors and multiple cultures doesn't mean that these races know how to best interact with each other, know how to respect each other, know how to work together, know how to, you know, value each other. And just because we have churches such as North Shore that is very packed with people from different race groups and stuff like that, we can't just leave it to assumption of, hey, everybody here just loves each other and understands and values each other 100%. That's why we as leaders have to take a special effort everywhere to really try to teach and educate people of saying, hey, you know, we live in a racially unequal world, especially this country. And I'm going to touch on what you said, Rob, because you touched the nerve there, talking about the immigrants. I believe it in this scenario. Maybe I talked to Nate about this. I don't remember. But Nate, you let me know if I did. I see it in the image of a father and his kids. And imagine a father that, you know, loves one child. You know, they kind of like praise this child. Maybe y'all come from like multiple like kid households. I'm an only child. I'll never understand that. I'm one of those spoiled ones. But so basically imagine if you're in a household, it's daddy and like 4 kids. Daddy just loves one kid and he just appreciates this kid so much. Oh, this kid is great. So great. All the beautiful, wonderful things. Nevertheless, he really just puts down the other children. Like he's really verbally aggressive. He's physically abusive. He makes it clear and well known that he likes one above the others. I feel like, Rob, like what you're saying, immigrants are a particular subset group in America that are still buying into the false reality or the false concept that if you just work hard enough, you can please daddy. You know what I'm saying? If you work hard enough, then you can make daddy proud. Daddy being, you know, corrupt America. If you just work hard enough and give it your all, then daddy will love you. Man, daddy's messed up. Daddy's never gonna love you. You just need to come to that understanding. And I appreciate my Black brothers and sisters. I appreciate my Native American brothers and sisters because they have not bought that BS. Or if they have long rejected it. And they're not afraid to challenge, they're not afraid to challenge daddy, you know, and all his corruptness and all his wrongfulness and all his hate and all his nonsense and really call him out in all his messed up doings. But unfortunately, immigrants, especially Latino immigrants, man, we can talk about it. They still think that if they work hard enough, they can please daddy. And it's gonna take some time, it's gonna take some conversation, especially with this minority group, about the injustice that is present and prevalent in America. That's a good point.
Do you have time for more?
We absolutely have time for more. I do want to just tack on to Felipe's comment. Definitely the Latino community, but I also know for me, I see it in the Asian community as well. So it's definitely something we can all work on. Please, Alyssa, go off.
Sweetheart, let me tell you, it is not just the Latino community. It is everything, period, right? Because that's what we put on our TV. That's what we export. It's one of our best ways of propaganda. I definitely came over here with a lot of those attitudes. Praise God for education and patient African-American friends. Y'all, I got a list of things I have to say. One of them is that this is such an unfair burden, okay? It is not fair, because if, as Black people, we spend our time saying, I don't want to do this for you, I don't want to have to keep teaching you, I don't want to go through the emotional labor of doing this, then they, meaning people who don't understand, don't learn. And we stay in this cycle. And then when we do, it's still exhausting. And so we still have that mental health trauma that we have to deal with. So it's not fair. And I think it's fair, it's smart to acknowledge that horrible conundrum that we find ourselves in. It's one of the reasons why white allies are so useful. I have a friend who, I tell people this because, and Nate, you've heard this story before, I went to school with her and she was just like, she missed race altogether. And I would be in the room being like, did I just go invisible? And when she posted Black Lives Matter on her Facebook 4 or 5 years ago, I was in public, I was on the L, and I cried because it showed that change is possible. But it took years. And sometimes that's just what we have to deal with. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that there's a difference between diversity and inclusion. We haven't mastered inclusion yet. There are whole people who have whole jobs that have that in the name. And I got news for you, none of them have figured it out yet because this is such an old issue. It is so entrenched in every aspect of our society that we ask this question and we keep coming up empty so far. So it's not to dismiss it, because that's not it at all. It's to understand the mammoth proportion of what it is that we're doing. The other thing I thought of, two more, is that the segregation, segregation is forced, right? I was watching one of those podcasts and the guy who they had on there is this old Adventist dude, like his kids were going to school in the 60s. He said, you know, the opposite of segregation is desegregation. And sometimes it is not a bad thing that people hang with the people who speak their same language, because again, spoons, right? If your native tongue is Spanish and you're talking to somebody in English, that's a spoon that's being taken up. And it's just the effort, maybe you don't have it. With Black people in particular, sometimes we need to allow them their space. We need to communicate with each other. There was something that happened in North Shore. It was a joyful moment. It was not a traumatic issue at all. But in that moment, I needed a Black person because nobody else would have understood. I would have had to translate everything. And I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to enjoy that moment with my people. So it's not always a bad thing that people self-congregate. We do have to ask ourselves why, right? Is it because it's just easier? Or is it because I don't think those people should be associated with? Those are different motives that we have to grapple with. And finally, I think one of the things that we can do as a church is if we get ourselves a common purpose. If we have a reason to exist, a project, something like that, it is easier for us to, for lack of a better way of saying it, accidentally realize that we are all the same. These race conversations are important on one level, but on the other level, the transformation of a mind and heart is long-term. And people who are successful, I guess, you know, there's a guy on YouTube, I never have done my research on him, so maybe he's lying, but he says that he has befriended, he's a Black guy, I think he plays blues, and he's befriended KKK people. And people are like, I'm sorry, you do what now? And he seeks those people out. And literally it is just by being in their space and them seeing him functioning in a normal, coherent, non-insane manner. That's it, just his existence. speaks so much to that. And so we do live in this world where these conversations are important, but at the same time, it's longer term. And if we were to focus on something like, say, I don't know, the gospel, or even something more practical, like we have an evangelism series coming, how do we all get better? And we have the representation. We're intentional about searching out so that it's not just one type of voice in the room. You'd be surprised to know how longer term our subconscious, which is where we really want to get to, can be reprogrammed. But like I said, it's an unfair burden that we bear because that's still work. It still takes stuff out of us. And I guess that's just the lot that we have.
I just wanted to add one thing to what Alyssa said. I love that you brought up, that it's not necessarily always a bad thing. So there's a book here called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And there's a quote in the book where it says, connecting with peers who are having similar experiences as your own serves as a buffer, as a protective force. It is also a way of affirming your identity. So I totally resonate with you, Alyssa, when you're like, sometimes you're in a moment and you just need to look at somebody and have that shared connection through your experience. And so I think this is definitely a good book to read, to understand that, yes, it is a part of us, going through the process of, we've all experienced similar things as a particular part of this culture. So we're going to naturally gravitate together, but the book also helps to focus on like breaking through those things. So just wanted to add that quick thing.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I do know that I've been let know we are running out of time. This is a conversation I'd love to continue. Maybe I'll reach out to some of you and I'll thank you and sure, and I'll ask if there's anything more that you'd want to share with the North Shore community in the future for us to do this. We'd love to have all of you guys back as speakers to come and share with us more. Sadly, we are out of time. I want to allow for any last minute points that you want to make on mental health or the last question we just had. Whatever it is, please share now before we have to go wrap up with prayer. Anybody want to say anything before we go? All right, then. It is late, guys. It's 8:40. Thank you guys for sticking around with us so much. A round of applause to all our speakers, or snaps, or you can just click the clapping button that is there for Zoom. But thank you guys so much for all coming out. Alyssa, I know it's been a long day for you, especially. I know that you had to go preach and then had to do this. Brianna, thank you for always being here with the youth. We appreciate your presence always. Robert, thanks for coming back. The sequels is rarely better, but I think this time it was. And Jackie, thank you for being a new friend to all of us. I'm going to ask Pastor Felipe to close out with a prayer for all of us here. We're just so grateful that you guys all came out.
Mm-hmm. Once again, thank you guys. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, Nate, for leading out and hosting. Really appreciate you guys. What an amazing, amazing event was it? It was a little bit long, but thank you so much for sticking through because I felt blessed. I hope you guys are blessed too. Anyway, let's bow our heads and close with prayer, shall we? Dear Heavenly Father God, thank you so much for this amazing, amazing opportunity that you gave us, Lord. We were able to level up the mind of each and every one of us tonight, Lord. We felt your Holy Spirit guiding the conversation, Lord. You were moving at our minds, moving at our hearts, Lord, and we're so excited about the future that you have for us, Lord. We might be living through some scary times. We might be living through social issues. We might be living through personal faith circumstances and situations, and we might be struggling to stay present and mindful, but nevertheless, help us to always cling to you, Lord. Above all things, you are God, above all gods, Lord. You are the God that there's nothing impossible for. And Father God, we believe that you are still in the miracle business and you are operating miracles each and every day in everybody's lives. And we thank you so much once again for this opportunity, for this wonderful event. Please be with our friends as they go on their several activities that they have to do for the remainder of the evening and the weekend. Please bless every family represented here. Continue to keep us safe. And please be with the youth of North Shore Seventh-day Adventist Church always. We thank you and we love you. We pray. Amen. All right, for all the winners that won the raffle, you're going to get a text message from me right now. I'll get some information from you, but you just got that Pastor Felipe money, so congrats. But anyway, guys, have a good night. Thank you so much, speakers. I'll reach out to you all individually after we're done. Really appreciate you guys. Have a good rest of the night. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Some final announcements for our North Shore people by our speakers. We are trying to do softball tomorrow, though the weather may not hold up, so please stay in touch for that. I believe because we've had such a long event, we normally have a game night. I think we're going to skip this evening, but we will be having game nights throughout the week, so you guys can all look forward to that. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you once again to all our speakers. If you can, reach out to the ones you know and just, give them a thank you for what they've done. God bless you all. Have a wonderful Saturday night.